Hey, Dragon Dreamers. Gina Virginia Casella here, and welcome to Story Species, Story Medicine, Extra Strength. When we share our stories, we give and receive medicine. One of the best ways to heal is with the earth. And that's exactly what we do with each other right here on Story Species, Story Medicine, Extra Strength. Ready to take your medicine? Hi, Dragon Dreamers. Gina Virginia Casella here, and welcome to Story Species, Story Medicine, Extra Strength. Today I have with me my good friend Alex Lipton, and he just finished writing his first book. Poor guy hasn't even published it yet, and I keep hounding him behind the scenes. So I really appreciate Alex being on Story Species today, Story Medicine, Extra Strength. And I hope you're ready to get your dose of medicine. Let me tell you a little bit about Alex first, and then I'll bring him to the stage. Alex grew up in Mahopac, New York, where he developed a passion for cinema and telling stories. Now, after watching John Landis's production for Michael Jackson's Thriller, remember that music video? And the subsequent behind-the-scenes featurette, Alex became fascinated with the nature of how movies are made, all about the behind-the-scenes movies and the filmmaking process. It became fundamental in Alex's understanding of spirituality. And at an early age, Alex was aware that reality in life itself was a behind-the-scenes world. Later, he moved to California in pursuit of a higher education and graduated from the film school in Los Angeles, Columbia College Hollywood, with a Bachelor of Fine Arts in directing, cinema, and TV production. Growing up with the guidance of his uncle, Dr. Bruce Lipton, Alex was taught with the understanding of how our perception controls our very biology, and that health and wellness is greatly influenced by our consciousness. For over a decade, it has been Alex's mission to help spread this message of self-empowerment using creative video production. He is guided by synchronicity and holds the subjects of ancient civilizations and lost worlds very close to his heart. And he spends his life helping others discover the wonders of the unknown. Having become a novice wizard of sorts, Alex is a trained facilitator in the Psych-K process, which is an energy healing modality rooted in energy psychology. Psych-K is a philosophy and method through which people can reprogram their subconscious beliefs in just a matter of minutes. Alex is skilled with experiential knowledge of the tarot and astrology, often incorporating both into his practice of helping people remember their divinity and sovereignty as human beings. He takes great pride in serving humanity in order to help bring healing and love to Mother Earth and all of its inhabitants. It's with great joy and honor today that I welcome Alex Lipton to this stage. Let me just pull him up here. Hi, Alex. How are you doing today? Welcome to Story Species, Story Medicine, Extra Strength.
Thank you, Gina. It is so wonderful to be here with you again, and I'm so honored to participate in this experience and be part of the many projects that I know you're working on as well. And I'm just so happy to be here. And thank you for sharing my little bio there. It's always exciting to hear that out loud, and it's not me reading it. And yeah, I'm excited to get into stuff today. Thank you.
Yes, I'm always full of questions. And like I was telling the audience, let me just pull up This is Alex's little description here. You can find it floating around on the internet. And this is his FreeIncarnation. And I love the Venn diagram. There's lots to be said about it. I don't even know where to start. What's the holdup, Alex? When are you going to publish this? And tell us a little bit about just process of publishing. Maybe because a lot of folks out there, they're like you. They have so much to share and say, but when it comes to publishing, they don't know where to start. And before you know it, you got folks like me hounding you. So why don't you just start by telling us, like, what inspired you to even write this book, FreeIncarnation?
Yeah, so let's see. So to address the first thing that you mentioned about the holdup, I started writing this book last May while on a road trip through the Southwest, and I had been thinking about and developing and processing what this book was going to be for many years. And once I'm very much as this book we'll get into, we'll talk about when I read a little bit into it, is synchronicity and the synchronic nature of time and being in a ritual ceremonial state. So there was a really cool opportunity while being on the road to initiate writing this book while I was I went and visited the Stanley Hotel in Estes Park, which is where the movie The Shining was, or the book The Shining was written by Stephen King. And so, which is Stanley Kubrick, one of my favorite directors. And I figured, that would be a really cool place to get started. I was sat outside the hotel in my van writing the book with my dogs, and that from that point on I had been writing it. So I would say it took me about 6 months or so to put the first draft together and go through revisions, which I'm still tweaking a little bit here and there. But the main thing right now I'm working on are illustrations to go with the book, because as you mentioned, the Venn diagram, it's also, I think that's how we kind of bonded initially. The Venn diagram is so important to me spiritually as a symbol because of taking two seemingly opposite things and putting them together where a third middle part is emerging. And so that's a theme throughout the book. But just in the sense of like your right and left hemispheres of your brain, where the left hemisphere is like the words in the book and the right hemisphere is the pictures. And I really want this book to be a living example, or a written literal example of that balance between the right and left hemisphere. So I'm putting that together and focusing on the publishing. I've been very new to this. Talking with you has been really helpful because you've published many books, and it's really cool just to have that motivation. So I've been exploring a couple different options. There's there's the published on Amazon. There's a couple other ones I've been looking into, like Spines, and a couple other that popped up on my algorithm. So exploring that as well, and then also keeping it open a little bit for the intention that perhaps I might have a publisher, because I do have the opportunity to perhaps be engaged with somebody like that as well. So I am making good strides for it, though.
That's amazing. And you know what? There's always publishing contests going on that folks can get involved in. And so it's just really exciting to be writing in general and sharing your story. Alex and I are going to be reading 4 chapters. I'll be sure to read you the summary of the book first. And I know that as we're reading, I'm going to be even more full of questions. So make sure folks at home are nice and comfy. I noticed Missing Time 420. Jason, nice to have you join us today. We've got Anchor Haven as well, and Mortali. Nice to see you here as well. So thank you all for joining us. I wonder, Alex, before we start diving deep into the book, if you can tell us a little bit about synchronicity in your life, and also this very cover. I'm trying to click on it here and bring it to the stage. There we go. When I looked at this cover, I was like, yeah, go to the light, go to the middle part of the Venn diagram. And I was wondering if it was intentional or coincidence, or maybe it's synchronicity, I don't know. But I just get the vibe when I look at this picture that the guy there is likely representative of you. And not worrying about left or right. going for the center, and it's like there's this rising triangular shape, like a doorway that's opening. And so I was hopeful you could spend a little time talking about the meaning of this along with synchronicity in your life.
Yeah,
Yeah, an
absolutely.
anchor haven saying, don't go to the light. Because
Actually,
what
that's a
happens
good.
when you die, right?
Yes, actually, Anchor Haven. That's really really interesting point to make there, and that is something that I discuss later in the book about what this experience of going to the light is. As perhaps I like to refer to it as a bug zapper in the astral plane, uh, and there's that whole thing, go to the light, and of course the subject. Oh, by the way, like I'm not sure where my screen is. I want to make sure my camera's pointing at you. Am I looking at you right now? Okay, I don't think I can hear you there. Oop. Okay, for some reason I cannot hear you. All right, whatever. Um, I but I'm wondering maybe if I need to. Yeah, there's no sound for you, Gina.
Oh, I was on mute. That's why.
Yeah.
Thankfully,
Okay.
that makes sense. Okay.
Okay.
So
So is it
sorry. Let
better
me
from
just
this
repeat
angle
that
or that
quickly.
angle?
Um, you know what? I can see you perfectly. You're not looking directly at me, but it's totally fine. Do you want
Okay.
to try and adjust your screen a bit, or?
Oh no, it's fine. I
Oh no, it's fine.
That's just my
That's just my
videography
videography. Oh, okay.
kind of thinking coming into play. But anyway,
But
so
anyway, so your
your question about
question
that
about
cover, I would
yes.
say yes. I would say that again, like I said, the theme of this book is really about coming together in balance and understanding the unity within polarity. And the thing is, polarity is part of life. It's one of the principles of nature. It's a natural law. It's considered to be one of the hermetic principles, which I discuss later in the book. The thing about polarity, as described in like the movie The Matrix, or without getting too deep, that's in the book. It's just the Venn diagram, the polarity of one circle and the other circle. There's, like you said, the right and the left, whether it's right, left, right hemisphere of the brain, left hemisphere of the brain, even the polarity between your heart and your mind. And a lot of times we're always in a war between these two things, a hidden conflict. Which side are you on? Are you more right brain? Are you more left brain? Are you a man, or are you a woman? Is there masculine, feminine? Is there, are you more heart based, or are you more logic? Are you more spiritual, or are you more scientific? And it's interesting that this whole polarity is a trap to get us to be divided. And it's proverbially like the angel and devil on your shoulders that I'm sure everybody's seen in some form or another in a cartoon. But the reality is that we are all these things, and it's about recognizing that inner middle part. So the Venn diagram I love, because when you take those two circles, you put them together just a little bit, you get that third area, which is not a third circle. It's not something else you draw. It only comes in by the definition of the emergence. When you put the two together, there's something that comes through right there, and that's the gateway. And I love, ironically, interestingly, that the Venn diagram is also kind of like an image of an eye, which suggests your third eye. And it's built right into our biology too, of course, right? So you have the one right eye, left eye. There is a third hidden eye inside of your brain, which is a gland called the pineal gland. It's actually a little bit more complex than just the pineal gland. It's part of a structure of consciousness in our brain that includes the pituitary gland and the thalamus and the hypothalamus. Ancient Tibetan monks would call this area the cave of Brahma, which is a little ventricle inside the brain that has cerebral spinal fluid in it. And this is like the little, if anyone's seen the movie X-Men, it's like Cerebro, which is this technology that allows Professor X to expand the powers of his mind and receive signals from outside of the computer. So it's just, the idea, like when you close your eyes and you imagine something that's not there, like imagine a circle, like where is that circle happening? You can see it in your mind's eye. It's not a figment of your imagination. There's actually like a little canvas or a movie projector screen inside of your brain that even if your eyes are open, is projecting images or information out into our world, which creates an interpretation of the real world. And the thing is, we have to recognize that that's there, because we often mistake the outside world as separate from what's going on inside. And the thing is, there are two different domains. There is what's inside and what outside. Again, there's a polarity, but there's an interweaving, there's an interference pattern that's going on. And so I think that's where synchronicity comes in. So synchronicity is about learning to see those patterns. Like where is the bridge? There's constant flowing bridges between what's happening within and what's happening outside of us. And that's kind of what that symbol represents to me.
That's great information, Alex. And folks out there who are tuning in, help me remember to unmute myself. Otherwise, there's an echo in the background. So that's my fault if you hear that. And everything Alex has to say about the Venn diagram is my language, and it's refreshing somebody else is saying this stuff. And I wrote down some notes while you were chatting, and I don't even know where to start, because so much of you said resonates. We can easily get into a conversation about multi-universes, the holographic universe, projection, reflection. Alex has a stronger science lens than I do, so it's nice to hear some vocabulary that I personally don't use, just because I don't have the memory recall. But folks out there resonate with that, I like science, but for some people out there listening, having a scientific fact like spinal fluid and how things are literally connected on the level of snake is really important to help this understanding, because these exact conversations, they weren't always safe to have, and even your uncle, Dr. Bruce Lipton, he's known as the godfather of epigenetics. And I was really surprised that he was made fun of back in the day. And now look who's, labeled godfather of epigenetics. And even my own background in social emotional learning and the power of the environment around you and the influence, and remembering that we also provide an epigenetics and environment to somebody else. And so where to start here? I was thinking about what Anchor Haven was stepping into, like this business of returning perhaps to darkness, because in truth, we are the light, but we come from the dark. And so there's these themes of duality. I also wrote down spirit incarnation, because a lot of folks out there will ask, where does the spirit come from? Well, in truth, nobody really knows any of the answers to any of these questions. But the color purple, for example, springs forth from mixing the color red and blue. So if you have your Venn diagram, that middle part, it's always there, whether we're aware of it or not. And we all have the power to mix red and blue to create purple. So like the spirit, it's just there, whether we're conscious of it or not. And whether we're alive or dead in the biological sense, where that purple zone, that living zone, would perhaps change color and perhaps merge and mold with other various Venn diagrams. I've already said too much. I also I wrote down the word interpretation, because I thought, interpretation, because your mind's number one job is to protect you, even if it means lying to you and creating false inhibiting beliefs that keep you stagnant and stuck. So when you're looking at the world around you and your brain is interpreting all this information, it's interpreting information based on your own ways of knowing and schema. And then that information on a biological level alters the chemistry within you. So you can see in just this one little, like, we've only been live for a little bit, we've really opened up a can of worms, right? And so obviously Alex is going to have to be a returning guest. And this business of the outside world, inside world, I like that you were commenting that we're not aware, because I have a lot of experience with little kids, right? Age 5 in particular. And we often talk about inside voice and outside voice because sometimes there's things that we should just keep in our head and not say out loud. And it reminded me of that because I genuinely don't feel like children realize there's a difference. They don't even know what thinking is. We tell them what it is. So I've already said too much, but just to reiterate, Alex, I'd love for you to tell us about synchronicity, this business of returning to the dark, the light, thoughts on spirit. Any direction you go in is fine with me. It's typically like that with me. And
Sure.
I'll mute
Yeah.
myself right now. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, a lot of cool subjects to discuss here, and I find that there's a term I use a lot in my book called going down the rabbit hole, and that is I'm always trying to think outside the box, because of course that term really is suggestive of a particular mode of operating in this world, when you go down the rabbit hole. But a lot of these terms are I mean, they're almost 30 years old now. I mean, in the pop culture, especially in light of the Matrix. So I'm always trying to think of other ways to use language creatively. But until then, to say going down the rabbit hole is a huge aspect of synchronicity, because synchronicity was a term really coined by Carl Jung, one of the great modern philosophers of this world, who spoke about archetypes and was really the foundational material for Joseph Campbell, whose great work, The Hero with a Thousand Faces, the hero's journey, and taking archetypes to the next level, where you start to see that there's a pattern of movement through nature, if you will. And so when you look at these idea of archetypes and patterns of transportation, of movement, you start to see that. I think I'd say that's really what synchronicity is to me in a lot of ways, is this idea of recognizing patterns, and the patterns of the archetypes of what's going on within you, and the synchronization with the experiences that you have, which are a little bit more outside of yourself. So that's why in movies or books, there's a common theme of going on a journey, meeting a wise person to help you get to the next place, which then eventually leads you to a dark night of the soul. You mentioned light and darkness, that's in there too, like the sun above and the shadow below, the shadow realm, the shadow self, where the person on the journey kind of questions everything that led them there in the first place, doubts them, they don't know who they are, they don't know where they're going anymore. And then it's in that moment of the dark night of the soul, as they say, where a spark is reignited within the experience of that person, which then leads them to go and rise to the occasion and fulfill their destiny of what they set off to accomplish in the first place, and then ultimately ending in more or less the same place that they started, but with a new wisdom, which is really the whole journey. It's reflected in the tarot cards as well. In the traditional decks, the first card is the Fool, which you see as like a foolish person who doesn't know anything, like, innocent, jumping off a cliff into the unknown, but then eventually goes down this long journey and discovers so many things, and eventually comes back and becomes a fool again. And one of the big learning lessons for me in that story is to recognize that part of the real knowing in life, like when you really know what's going on, that life is a mystery. That you really don't know what's going on. The question is, are you accepting of that and free and courageous enough to take the risk of stepping off that cliff into the unknown? And so I think synchronicity for me, and as the first couple chapters of my book, I detail my journey with synchronicity and how it began and like how crazy it is. So I'll leave it for there. But to me, that's like synchronicity is more than just following the signs. And so and just a fun thing I actually thought about, since I do a lot of traveling in my van and I stay at campgrounds, I want to have a sign made, like a road sign made that just says on it, "This is a sign." And put that next to my van, so people are walking by and just like, there's signs everywhere for their bathrooms over here, and they're like, "Oh, this is a sign." Because in my earlier years, when I first started doing all this learning and exploring of reality, I always looked at it like, this is a sign. It's a sign. The synchronicity, things are lining up. But what I've learned is that it's not as much about the signs. The signs are important, but it's also about recognizing the compass. You need a compass and a map, really. You need a map to go along with the signs. If you just follow the signs all day, you could just very well end up going in circles. You know, if you don't know where you're going, you could follow signs all day, signs all over the place. If anywhere you look, you're going to see a sign. Like that's the point. You have to have some sort of internal orientation and understanding within yourself to like allow you to know where you're going and how to get there the best way. Because like there's a thing, like they say, everywhere you go, there you are. So it's like if you're just following the signs and just following synchronicity, like trusting that the universe is going to take you where you go, and you're just like along the ride, you might find yourself in places that you don't really want to be. This is again the balance or the polarity between the being part of something bigger and also recognizing that you have sovereignty. You have a spark within you that gives you a sense of individuality. Because if everything was all one and homogenous, there's a great show that just came out on Apple TV called Pluribus. And I think that gives you a little insight into like, what would it be like if everybody was just like one hive mind and everybody knew everything all the time. And it's like, there's no individuality. It's out of balance. We need to be able to do both. The cells in our body are individuals, but they all operate in a community. So it's when the cells start acting out of balance, then things have problems. So to me, synchronicity is about recognizing the patterns, follow the signs, and also check in with your inner map. Don't forget to take stops along the way and ask yourself, am I going where I want to go? Where am I going? Synchronicity is kind of like in my take of it, it's like it's a hidden, it's just a piece of a puzzle of something that we have yet to truly integrate into our lives. Kind of like deja vu as well. Deja vu is this weird thing. There's some scientific explanations of what it is. I don't think they're that great. They're like idiosyncratic. They don't give us the full, that's not suitable enough for it. It is a phenomenon. Like, oh, that's just your imagination. Oh, that's just a dream. Well, maybe it's not just your imagination. Maybe it's not just a dream. Maybe it is a dream, like literally on the next level. And synchronicity could be a great way to help us just come up above the surface a little bit to see what's going on.
That was a phenomenal answer, Alex. And again, just thinking away here. And it's nice for Alex to shine his light today because Alex, he's hosting his uncle's show. He's also hosting my show, Dreaming with Gemstone Gina. And so now Alex is finally getting to shine his light and not host. So I forgot about the hero's journey. Alex and I initially connected about the Venn diagram and the hero's journey. Myself, initially, I had a big problem with the hero's journey, just like I had a big problem with the rules of the mind. However, once you get to know them, you can work with them, right? And so like Alex was saying, you can live consciously so you can die consciously. You exactly say that, but it's basically what Alex is saying, is that you can take charge of your life. You know, we're born with life living us. We don't have a choice to follow suit. We're born into survival mode, right? Whatever family we're born into. And we could have an interesting conversation about incarnation and choosing our families, but ultimately, you are not your genes. You are not your programming. You can make change. And you were talking a lot about eagle condor medicine because that's the power of the hero's journey. Is it's not this continuous circle, it's a spiral. So that fool that comes back, well, when you come back, you're now the wise fool, but now you're on a different level. So you're like a baby again. And then every time you restart a level, no different than Super Mario, right? Every time you start a new world, you need to get to know it. And typically what happens in the hero's journey is we hear the call, we don't respond to it. Eventually the response is, I don't want to go. Then eventually we go. Then, you know, we meet people and get insight. But then there's actually a point in the journey where we don't want to return. Why? Because we're comfortable where we are. And this is typically when spiritual crisis happens and we get pushed into that other spiral, if you will, which often can be seen as a spiritual awakening. And for many folks out there listening, myself included, it was a spiritual crisis. It was financial crisis. It was just crisis inside out, upside down. And I learned the hard way that the hero, well, there is no hero, really. That's the triangle of disempowerment that we're all caught up in. And Alex and I, we started getting into it about this triangle of disempowerment because I like it and I don't like it. I get it. It's a conscious mind thing, subconscious mind thing. We need the structure. We need the logic. But Alex, I was hopeful you could speak to this triangle of disempowerment, how there can't be a victim without a hero. Well, now you need a villain. Well, the hero and the villain, it turns out they're the same guy in our greater oneness. And so I was hopeful we could talk a little bit more, and maybe in a little bit we'll actually read your book, and then I'm always full of questions as well. But what are your thoughts on the eagle condor medicine and the return from the hero's journey, the upsets that come with it, and this, when you return from the hero's journey, you have to share the knowledge, right? I've always got lots to say. I'll let Alex. It's Alex's turn to shine today.
You bring up it's totally cool, and you prompt a lot of great questions, and you're right on the money as it is with a lot of these things. Let's start with the concept of the eagle and the condor. This is an incredibly important prophecy that comes from the Hopi Nation in the Southwest United States, and even probably dates back longer to an older culture from then. But the idea of the eagle and the condor is, again, the balance between not east and west, which we're very accustomed to, especially in the wake of the 1960s with the introduction of Eastern philosophical spiritual traditions like yoga and Buddhism and things like that into the West. But then the eagle and the condor is about the integration between the North and the South, specifically the Southern hemisphere of like the Americas, South America, and the Northern one, North represented by the eagle and the South represented by the condor. And this is a really good representation of the divine feminine and divine masculine forces coming together. Whereas the eagle, the bird of the North, very much represents the masculine energy, bird of prey type bird. And then the condor represents the more feminine, gentle one. And that these birds constantly have been at odds with each other. They go at it, and it's like you can see it happening. And this will maybe lead into our victim oppressor triangle, the victimization triangle. But these two things have been at odds with each other for a really long time, and it's been a war, again, this war between the opposites, and it's a war on consciousness because these are forces within every single person. Every single person has both masculine and feminine energy within themselves, and just without including gender, like in that sense, but like more from the, like, think about a battery or a magnet. There's a part that attracts and there's a part that repels. That's the you could say the divine feminine, divine masculine forces within every single person. And the eagle and the condor prophecy is all about how one day these two birds will no longer have conflict with each other and start to fly together in harmony at the same level. There have been a lot of people that misinterpret that because of the fact that they've been victimized, oppressed by something out there. And now let's get into that for a second. This really horrible analytical overlay that has been we've been filtering reality through in our culture and our civilization for many, many thousands of years. What is this exactly? Just imagine a triangle. On each side of the point of the triangle, the three sides, you have one side, which is the victim. And on the next side, the victim is oppressed by an oppressor. And this oppressor leads the victims to eventually need something to get out of this struggle, which is a savior. And then eventually the savior, this is a vicious cycle of it, the vicious loop. The savior ends up becoming, over time, through the power of adoration and idolization, becomes the very thing that he was fighting against, or he or she was fighting against. The oppressor then becomes the oppressor. The savior eventually becomes the oppressor. And then the oppressor ends up continuing the cycle all over again. We just can't get out of this. At some point in your life, most people even within one sentence, can shift between all three of these things. Within one sentence, you can be a victim, and then the next minute you're a savior. You're there to help, and then the next minute you're the one doing the tyranny in that situation. We all kind of moderate through these, and I think that I tend to think that this particular frame would be best associated to a cultural identity, and not, like a human culture, like human beings on a community level. This is something that we all share in one way or another, similar to how we share a perception of time, our perception of life and death. There are different views on that from one civilization or culture to another culture, but more or less, I think this idea of being in the victim, oppressor, savior triangle is a relic of a time long ago that we have lost touch with in terms of our early development as a human civilization and as a human race. There is a whole new exploration that we're going down through here now to see like what actually happened 10 to 13,000 years ago at the end of the Ice Age. Like, where did all these megalithic structures come from? Who built them? Like, we don't know. We don't know. But there's a lot of indication that there was a massive catastrophe that took place on the Earth. You know, you have to think that the ancient cultures a long time ago, talk about synchronicity, they used to walk around and look at the stars and like just visualize somebody standing there looking up and being like, wow, have you ever been at night looking up at the sky in like a really clear dark night and seeing the Milky Way in the galaxy? It's beautiful, stunning. But then just to think of something like a comet or an asteroid or some sort of interstellar catastrophe happen where you're out there just watching how beautiful it is back 10,000 years ago, and then all of a sudden something like one of these stars falls from the sky and just destroys the world and like creates massive devastating floods and earthquakes and volcanoes. That creates what you could say is a traumatic event, which in an individual case today we call it post-traumatic stress disorder. But there is a level above that in terms of the macro level, like human culture having a post-traumatic stress disorder of these events that happened 10 to 13,000 years ago. And then I mentioned it in my book, not in the chapters we're going to read today, but there's a great movie called Regarding Henry with Harrison Ford. And Harrison Ford plays this cutthroat lawyer who's a jerk, really. He's cheating on his wife. He doesn't have time for his daughter. He ends up getting shot in the head while going out to a grocery store, goes into a coma, and he survives. But when he wakes up, he has no memory at all of his life up until that point. He can still function, but he's got like a childlike attitude. And the thing is that his wife and his daughter, he's great now. Like, he's like the dad she always wanted him to be. He's attentive to his wife. But then it's like the whole movie is about Harrison Ford's character discovering the person that he was before this event and how he's like, I'm not that person. I don't want to be that guy. I don't want to get my memories back now. I think that movie applies on a very similar level to human civilization, because before this traumatic event took place 10 to 13,000 years ago at the end of the Ice Age, we have a whole lot of history that we don't remember from back then, but we have it in our unconscious minds. We have it in our collective unconscious minds. Perhaps this is where we get our archetypes from. We get our sense of astrology and even the hero's journey from, is that we're kind of following a pattern, a groove, like a groove in a record that has been there the whole time, but we're stuck in this loop. To me, that's the victim, oppressor, savior triangle. And it's useful because it helps us. It's not there as a requirement, but I think it's there to help us understand like our situation. You know, if we're going to solve something, if we want to get out of this and have a new system, we have to recognize the problem first. Like, you know, if you got some internal bleeding, you know, you don't just go in there and try anything. You want to find out where the internal bleeding's happening first. So like, we got to identify where the source of this problem comes from, as opposed to just like, oh, it's just random, or oh, it's you know, because again, that's like, I'm the savior, I'm going to tell you where the problem is. We have to recognize we're all collectively sharing this experience and projecting it onto a world. It doesn't have to be the world. It's just a program, and programs are meant to be changed, especially when they degrade the system. Okay, got your sound.
Absolutely. That was phenomenal information. And it all made sense and flowed because I was thinking about blueprints and root causes, and then you nailed it at the end there because you started talking about trauma and history and the mysteries within the history and this business of remembering. And it's like, do we even want to remember? And do we want to pick and choose what we remember? And what we do remember, how does that make us feel? And then how do we alchemize ourselves moving forward, living consciously? Because everything exists in a state of impermanence. Even if you've got a really great thing going on right now, eventually that will end. So we never want to be in a state of clinging. We always want to come from a place of indifference. And it also went back to the eagle condor medicine when you were talking, because when it comes to root causes, identifying and smashing blueprints, that's how you, when you find yourself stagnant, that's where mind reprogramming comes in, and modalities like Psych K or My Passion, RTT. And I was thinking about the greater details and the themes because this show is called Story Species, Story Medicine, Extra Strength, because we are a story species. Our logical mind demands that structure of the hero's journey, for example, where there's a beginning, a middle, and an end, something concrete that we can break down. And the details, this is where hypocrisy and duality kind of play around with each other, because the details ultimately in any story don't really matter. The details are there to drive the plot. So the story is not even about the story. It's just to get to the greater themes. But now here's where duality and hypocrisy come into play. Without those details, we could never get to those greater themes. And those details, like any programming, every now and then, eagle condor medicine, zoom in, zoom out. Eagle condor is all about the greater themes, but sometimes eagle condor needs to put on the glasses and come and check out those details for that exact reason, to make sure that we're alchemizing and that our own individual hero's journey is in our best interest, holding us in the highest light. Because even though we're all one, what works for me personally may or may not work for Alex personally. And so within our greater oneness, there is flexibility. And so, any thoughts on that, Alex? We will get to
Yeah, that's a
Alex.
really definitely that's a really good point. From with a filmmaking background, or at least film education, you learn about the different modalities of movies. Some movies are character driven, other movies are plot driven. That's generally the two modalities of movies. Of course, there's way more like abstract movies, think other kinds of stories, but like for the most part, movies are either driven by the character or the plot. And the thing is, they're both good. They both can be. You can have a really good plot-driven movie where the things that are happening along the story are really interesting, and you want to see what happens next, and what's happening now really matters. For example, a really good plot-driven movie would be, let's see, any Steven Spielberg movie, like or a plot-driven movie could be Lord of the Rings. A lot like a hero, like a standard hero's journey movie would be a plot-driven movie. The hero's journey is a plot. I mean, that's essentially what it is. So it's good. It's like when it's done right, and I mean that's why there's so many movies and literature follow that pattern, whether they know it or not, because it works, because it's part of our journey. We have a, you break it down very simply: a beginning, middle, and end, like and then all the pieces in between. But then there are character-driven movies, like mostly any Martin Scorsese film, like Goodfellas, or Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Or that's Quentin Tarantino. Quentin Tarantino often has a lot of character-driven movies as well. Casino, Martin Scorsese film. It's really like it's like what happens next is a crapshoot. You don't know what's going to happen next, and it really doesn't matter. You're just following this person along, seeing how they respond to situations. And so movies can be done horribly as well. Like I mentioned in the comments, a lot of the movies coming out through Hollywood and Disney now are just crap. Like they're following the hero's journey, but they're doing it really badly. They are just recycling and reusing old stories without changing them at all. And there was a comment in there of stories gone from learning to programming. From learning to programming, yeah, absolutely. I mean, the Hollywood movies are programming at this point. They are not creating anything new. They're just like rehashing old stories to entertain people, which, you know, is fine. I'm not the kind of person that will dunk on a movie and say it's bad, because I know there are people out there that are going to like it one way or another. Just because I don't like it doesn't mean somebody else is going to like it. But I think that filmmaking lens applies to our personal lives as well, because the thing is, you want to be able to have both. You want to be able to have, you know, because you are a character. You know, you could say that you could, by default, you're the main character in your own life because you're seeing through your lens, but you're also a character in somebody else's life. There's that saying in the spiritual new age world, like you're the creator of reality. I don't like that as much, because it's taking it too far on the other side of the spectrum. Like, you're the main character, and that when you die, the world ceases to exist. That's not a good that's not a good way to go about things. I think you have to also remember that you're a character in other people's lives, and that it's good to develop your character. Be the best version of yourself for you, and also recognize that there's that golden rule: do unto others as you wish to be treated. That's a golden rule for a really good reason. It's not something from religion. It's a golden rule that applies to everybody in human race. It's called having a conscience. Having a conscience. You don't need programming to have a conscience. We are born with the innate ability to have a conscience just by being alive to a mother and having that natural nurture coming in. That gives us a conscience. But we have been deceived over many thousands of years that we are inherently bad. We are inherently animals, and if we didn't have like an authority figure to come in and tell us what is right and what is wrong, we would just destroy each other. We are like a self-destructive organism. In the Christian, like really hardcore, like when I was raised in originally Roman Catholic Church, they would tell us, yeah, well, you're born with original sin. You were born sinful. And it's like, I think there's a lot of misinterpretations to that. That's just a very dangerous thing. Again, makes us need a savior. You are oppressed by something that you didn't do, and you need somebody to come in and fix it for you. Medical world does that too a lot with pharmaceutical drugs. And I'm not saying pharmaceutical drugs are bad. I'm not, because there are really good doctors and good medicines out there. We shouldn't say no to these things. I'm just saying that we need to have more of a whole well-rounded approach. Think of it, these are all tools. Character is a tool. Plot is a tool. Medicine is a tool, whether it's just spiritual medicine and belief or it's physical allopathic medicine. These are all tools. We don't want to throw them out. Think of this tool, but well, why are there too many tools? I can't keep them all in this toolbox. Yeah, tell that to Mary Poppins. Mary Poppins has a bag that you could fit anything you want in there. You just want to keep developing tools. And I'll end with this funny little you mentioned something about the details before, and how it's like you don't want to get stuck in the details. It's not really about the details. In filmmaking, there's a specific detail, a specific thing. It's called a plot device that it really doesn't matter what it is. It's a thing or an event, or it's basically usually a thing, like an object that is super important, that they need to get this thing, or they are carrying this thing because it has to get, like the ring in Lord of the Rings is one of these things. It's called a MacGuffin. It's kind of silly, but when you're watching a movie, like people get really creative on these plot devices or MacGuffins. Like it's a special machine that they have to get into to get to the next thing, and they're like pressing a bunch of buttons and doing a bunch of levers. It's like none of that really matters. It's just the fact that they have to go through this thing, or they need this thing to get there. In Pulp Fiction, Quentin Tarantino's film, the ultimate MacGuffin, Quentin Tarantino was a genius in putting this together. In the very beginning, there's a suitcase that they have to get, like John Travolta and Samuel L. Jackson. They walk into the room and they open up the suitcase. And there's a glowing light. They're like, what's in the box? What's in that suitcase? You're always wondering what is in the suitcase. And the point is, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. There's literally just a light bulb in there that's shining a light. And the actors are going, is that what I think it is? And they're like, yeah. Like it builds mystery. and it keeps the story moving. But that thing could be anything. And in our lives, I think we got to remember to keep our eyes out for MacGuffins. They're like permission slips. We write our own permission slips. A lot of times we find ourselves with our wheels spinning, or we want to do something, but we can't do it because of X, Y, and Z. Well, X, Y, and Z is the MacGuffin. Remake that into something gives you permission to do it. Create a plot device. You can make it, and that's the point, is it can be anything you want it to be, as long as you believe in it. So, pulp fact. Nice one, Edgar Haven.
I was just going to ask, pulp fiction or pulp fact? There was another question up here too in the chat for you, Alex. What does Alex think about the new disclosure movement?
Oh yeah, the movie. Yeah, good question. Well, I'm not exactly looking forward to it. I will see it, but I'll preface it with this: whatever happens in the world today, I am not. I just don't think I can be surprised. I'd be surprised if I was surprised something happened. Literally anything could happen. Steven Spielberg, who directed Disclosure Day, he's been working on this movie for a while, and a lot of his movies, he's done a lot of alien movies. There's a whole interesting story or legend about how the first alien movie that he filmed, which is one of probably my favorite Steven Spielberg film, which is Close Encounters of the Third Kind. There's a whole interesting story legend about how Steven Spielberg actually worked with Jacques Vallée and these actual people that were working in the Majestic 12 alien program. And so, like, things that were happening in that movie in terms of the way that the aliens were interacting with the government, government, I put in quotes because it's not the government we think of today. Our government doesn't really know too much about the aliens. It's not the legal government that has anything to do with this. There's a shadow government. But anyway, Steven Spielberg, I think, has been involved with these people, as many Hollywood directors have been, including Stanley Kubrick. And I think that the movie is just part of a ongoing operation to create, to basically normalize the whole UFO topic in a way that will prepare the population for an eventual and inevitable, I believe, disclosure of what's going on. It's already happening to the point where people will see court hearings and Senate hearings about the UFO, UAP, non-human intelligence stuff, and people don't even care. It's happened. Like, if you go back in time, if I were to send that news footage back to myself 25 years ago and be like, look what's happening on the news, I would have been like, oh my God, the world must be like, the aliens are here and the government's acknowledging them. And I'd have to sadly tell myself, be like, nobody really cares. Like, and it's not because no one cares. It's because they've been, like MK Ultra and all these organizations have been, Majestic 12, they've been slowly kind of turning desensitizing us to the shock that it would be for an alien event to happen. Go all the way back. This goes all the way back to Orson Welles and the War of the Worlds audio radio show, where they did this live broadcast as if a alien invasion was happening in New Jersey, but most people missed the introduction part where Orson Welles explained that this wasn't real, which is not an accident, by the way. Like, people the other show kind of turned out to be a flop, and so people ended up turning to the radio show with War of the Worlds, and people thought aliens were invading, and it caused a panic, like a really bad panic. So that was an operation to see how would people react if there was an alien disclosure, and it wasn't good. So they're like, okay, so now we have to do a whole project to condition the population's mind. Conditions the individual is one thing, but when you condition the population, that's a whole other thing. They had to condition the mind of the population to respond differently to aliens. And, I think Disclosure Day is just another, it's a big milestone for that. Steven Spielberg, returning to the alien subject, seeing it because the Super Bowl was on Sunday night, and they showed the Disclosure trailer, and it was one of the most viewed Super Bowl shows because of the halftime show and everything. But when I saw it, I'm like, I joked with my dad when I was watching, and I'm like, yeah, don't worry, it's just a movie. It's just a movie, Dad. Has nothing to do with reality whatsoever. It's just a movie. And it's like we all laugh because that's the whole bottom line, is that it's not just a movie. That's one of the premises of my one of my YouTube channels, the Synchrocosm, is that they do not spend. Do you think they spend hundreds of millions, billions of dollars every year just simply to entertain you? No. It's not simply to entertain you. They are deliberately programming people with reactions to events that have not happened yet. Your microphone.
That's very fascinating because I wrote down disconnect, and then as you were chatting, I was circling it because the movies are almost seemingly like a way to educate folks out there because it's a safe way. Even this show, for example, and all my content is now classified as entertainment, which initially really troubled me. But now I actually appreciate it being classified as entertainment because I don't have to worry about anybody suing me. I am mindful like about dropping names and that kind of stuff, decimation of character, but really we can talk about whatever we want and nobody's going to sue us for that. We can make whatever predictions we want. And I also feel hypersensitive about power and control and the power of influence. And somebody really cool like Steven Spielberg, like no offense to him, but he has tremendous power because by default, he's already got a lot of audience, right? So this guy could intentionally publish a movie that totally sucks and it would still get a lot of views just because the reputation Steven Spielberg, right? So when you have anybody like a president or a poster boy, if you will, a poster boy, a face that everybody already trusts, wow, imagine the power you can yield. And what's interesting is this business of conditioning, because we don't just like we have our authentic reactions and the way that we respond to things, but we're being trained to react and respond differently. And I mean, when it comes to conversations like full disclosure, I don't think it's a good idea for any ET, angel, whatever category you want to use, to be all like, "Hi, my name's Gina, the ET." Like, we have so many, like as a public school teacher, I resigned, but I was a teacher for 20 years involved with the union. And when it came to students who identified as LGBTQ2 plus spirited, like we're still facing a lot of challenges with that. So what is the future going to look like for students who have extrasensory abilities or ETs coming to school? And if you listen to folks like David Adair chat, very interesting because it seems like we're already there where people have AIs or human AI hybrids as a significant other. And in the movies, we're starting to see this now where it's like, you might have a boyfriend that's part AI and it's to help smooth over these reactions. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that, Alex, and then I can read the summary of your book and we can move on with that. And we'll definitely have to have Alex back here. And before I read Alex's summary, I'll scan through the comments in the chat because I noticed there's some combo there.
Yeah.
So Alex,
Well, I completely agree with you about. I completely agree with you about Steven Spielberg. He has the ultimate prestige. They literally made Lego sets. Steven Spielberg, make your own movie, the Lego set, which I always wanted when I was a kid, but they were hard to get. Yeah, I mean, yeah, he's a household name. I mean, he's the director. He's the Hollywood director that everyone. I mean, he is the guy, and the term prestige is an understatement when it comes to Steven Spielberg. We used to joke in film school that whenever it was cloudy in Los Angeles, it's because Steven Spielberg has a button in his office that when he presses it, a giant screen comes up over the sky, like in the Truman Show, and blocks the sun out. So we always just thought like Steven Spielberg, we're talking about geoengineering and weather control. We were like, well, Steven Spielberg's got the weather on lockdown in LA to control the movies. But to address what you were saying about the disclosure, I completely agree as well. There's a term in Star Trek called the Prime Directive. which for anybody who doesn't know what that is, it's a very important, perhaps the most important rule in interstellar travel in the future, where these people are flying from one planet to the next. You never interfere in a planet's activities or the culture of a planet until they have reached a certain level of awareness and have actually called out to receive these aliens. Because if you don't, if you go and if let's say in the Star Trek, like the Enterprise, Captain Kirk or whatever, they decide to go down to a planet and interact with the population when they're not ready. They most times in the show when this happens are perceived of as gods or demons or something like that, or like oppressors, or like they end up getting worshipped and venerated as gods. So I find that interesting because yeah, you could say it's a Star Trek science fiction show. I like to think of it more as a science faction show, and it's pointing to some interesting truths that perhaps are part of that time period I was suggesting that we have lost touch with tens of thousands of years ago, where today people are saying, oh, the aliens, are they invading? Who are they? Are they going to invade? And there's a theory that there's all the part of one of the factions in the shadow government wanting to actuate a staged alien invasion using reverse engineered craft to make it look like aliens are here. Ronald Reagan back in the 1980s, when he spoke to the United Nations, said, you know what, in the peak of the Cold War, what would be great is if we were faced with an alien threat from outside this world, because then we would all have no more differences. We'd be fighting a common enemy. I mean, that's what the plot of the movie Independence Day is about, essentially. That's the Ronald Reagan legacy in a movie right there. So there are those theories, but I'm not so convinced that that's going to happen, because I agree with you. I think that the truly extraterrestrial species and civilizations, they're not going to come down here and just save us or just show up one day, because of that fact that like the question, are we ready to receive that? If an alien showed up today, what would that do? It would only create more problems. And I think it's not something like a novel question of whether or not this would happen. I think it's based on a legacy from, again, this series of traumatic events that happened 10 to 13, even longer, thousands of years ago, that you want to ask yourself, like, when is the alien invasion going to happen? It already happened. That's why we have like monotheistic religions today. That's why we have religion in general. That's why we have kings and governments. and taxes. Like, all of these things come back. That's why we have slavery. It's why we have war. Like, all of these things trace back to the origin point of an alien invasion that happened 10 to 13, possibly longer, thousands of years ago. The gods of the ancient world, they were all fighting with each other. I go into this in my book a lot, but I think a full disclosure is something that is very contrived. It's very orchestrated by the ruling elite, the hidden ruling elite, not the people, no one that you see today on the, like, there's that term, follow the money. And that's a really good thing to do, because you start to see like the architecture of control that's going on, but they're not the ones actually controlling things. There are people that we don't know that are hidden behind them, that are influencing them. So, I think of like the billionaires in the world today, they're like the shareholders of the corporation. And then there are board members who they all want to be on the board. And sometimes they can have some influence of what the board does, but we don't actually see who's on the board. They're the people, to use another movie reference, Eyes Wide Shut by Stanley Kubrick, which is becoming more and more real every day with the Epstein files and everything. But the board members are the ones that choose the CEO. And the CEO, we have no choice of who that is. We are given a simulation of choice who gets to be the CEO, like whether it's the CEO of one country or the other country. But whoever's running the disclosure operation is coming from that level of organization. And it's all meant to continue to maintain control. Because the thing is technology is so dependent on this stuff. Like, a lot of the computer technology and tons of it, all of it really, comes back to this reverse engineered technology that comes from crashed or downed UFOs from back in the end of the 1940s. You know, from the 1940s onward, our computer evolution has been so huge, and they have such advanced technology, including anti-gravitic technology, healing technology, stuff that would essentially heal the world of all the problems that it has right now. But they're not releasing it because of national security risks. And there's a lot of reason why they won't release it. I could understand to us, it's like, yeah, release it all now. Well, give us the disclosure, give us the truth. But Jack Nicholson says in A Few Good Men, you can't handle the truth. And you know what? Like, he's the bad guy in the movie. Maybe, yeah, we can handle the truth. I think we should get more truth. Let's do that. And also at the same time, let's keep in mind the technology here. You give like a chimpanzee a machine gun. That's a technology. Is that good idea? Is that good idea? Like, think of us as the chimpanzees in this point. If all of a sudden we were given something that we could reverse, like a free energy device that we could turn into a gravitic explosion that would destroy the world. So I can understand why some of these people up at the top levels of the organization are trying to be careful about how they disclose stuff because of the impact it might have. Some might say they carry a legacy of memory from all the way back in Atlantis, which is where through their hubris and these ancient people, they ended up destroying their civilization because they misused technology. So they're like, those people today are like, we're not going to let that happen again. But again, it comes all back down to relationship. So I think that when it comes to disclosure, like, as the Gnostics would say, if you have the eyes to see, you will see. If you're looking for it, you'll see it. It's there. It's happening right now. Like, but it comes to, as far as an official government narrative or media and like even aliens coming down, man, we are here and the aliens are here. I'd be very, very cautious and weary of that. I don't want that to happen because I don't trust it. If you see like a bunch of UFOs show up on the White House lawn and a bunch of like Nordic, like blonde people looking like Marilyn Monroe come out and say they're here to help us, I'd be really worried about that. Probably like Antarctic Nazis or something like that. We have no idea what the hell's going on.
Hilarious. So much information in there. But on a serious note, like I totally get what you're saying, right? Like, because I see what's interesting is Alex, a huge movie buff, right? And Jason, Missing Time 420, also has a background in theater as well. So you two, probably connect. I know it's Jason subscribed to your YouTube there, but like, I have these interesting dreams where I'm on a river and I float by these islands, and each island, it's very simplified. Each island is representative of a universe. Some of those universes, it's complete darkness, lights are out, and we're not allowed because they're not awakened yet. The complete lights are out, right? And then some of their other universes we can interact with, but it always begs the question, who gets to decide? What is the criteria? And I feel like that's part of alchemy. And I also feel like some secrets are safe for keeping, right? Because I have a belief that ET folk, angel folk, they crash land here. And I do believe that ETs and other folks, they're like us. They can be autonomous and have their own independence. And so it's a case-by-case scenario, because just like, somebody might steal a car or borrow their parents' car without permission, who's to say an ET or even just another Homo sapiens sapien whose parent has really extraordinarily cool technology, even illegal, highly ethical, that they play around with it, and all of a sudden, oh my God, they just portholed over here to over there. What do you do with that? That's part of the disclosure, right? And it's a real treat having Alex on the show, just because it's a treat to have Alex on the show. But where I disconnect with the audience is I don't watch the movies. And so it's nice for Alex to be here, like Anchor Haven, Jason, totally relating here. But what's interesting is the movies you're referring to, they sound familiar to me. I have watched some of them, but it's interesting when folks like me who aren't movie buffs, we know what you're talking about, even though you have a scientific name for it or something like that. And to me, that's powerful synchronicity that you can't ignore, right? And these symbols that are being used in the movies and whatnot, and the influences in the greater dream world, really, really spoke to me, and it made me think about this business of the ancient future. Like, Alex has a lot more books to write. Alex is also passionate about the Anunnaki and folks like Thoth. And so I see like you having a series just on multiple series about different things, you know. But I think about the Tudor Danann as well, because the theory, philosophy behind them is that they already lived here on planet Earth. And then when they died, off they went, but then they came back as a spirit. And so it's like, they're not ETs, they're returning now from their hero's journey, if you want to call it that. What are your thoughts, Alex? And for what it's worth, if we hit 3 p.m. and we haven't read the book, we'll read the book by 3 p.m. Alex and I, we're going to read the first 4 chapters. Alex is going to read the first 3. I'll read the 4th. So we've got lots to look forward to. But if you've got a burning question for Alex, put it in the chat now, because once I let this guy speak, I will go over the chat and then we'll get busy. All right. So, Alex, what are your thoughts about the ancient future, or who gets to decide? And what is this business about? Also, you made a comment about animals, right? Because we're dirty, we're animals, we stink, and ET folk don't like that. They like to be very clean and refined, because back in history, that's what distinguished a human from an animal, and this us versus them mentality. So I have a bad habit of throwing too much at my guests, but the ancient future, how we treat each other, who gets to decide? What are your thoughts, Alex?
Yeah. I love that term, ancient future, because it's paradoxical in our current understanding of time. Because ancient suggests behind us in the past, and future, of course, is in front of us, ahead of what's to come. But as my book, I go into in my book, I bring forth a concept that I'm sure a lot of people have heard about. It's called holographic time. You mentioned the holographic universe. Time is a hologram. And time and space are not separate from each other. And again, there's another one of those polarities. Well, where there's space and then there's time. Like, no, they're interconnected. In a sense, so like the concept of the future is exactly that. It's a concept. There is no such thing as the future. The future is just something that allows us to explore the ideas of what we want to do next and plan things. Like, the concept of a future for the ancient people allowed them to like understand the seasons, so they could plant crops to make sure that they had food for their community, like on a yearly basis, and be able to predict what's going to happen next. It's not always accurate, because nature is unpredictable and there's chaos to nature. And we have to surrender to the mystery of the universe a little bit, because there is a mystery to it. Future is a mystery. And then as far as the past is concerned, the past is a program. The past is a printout. The DNA in a lot of ways is representative of this. The DNA is like the printout of the past in a time continuum. You mentioned how time is like a spiral. Well, guess what? The DNA is a double helix spiral. It's a literal manifestation of what we consider to be the past. And even in a lot of ways too, the past, the past isn't real either. Like, just like the future isn't real. It's a concept, but it's got more substance to it, in the sense that, like, today, when we talk about the simulation theory, and it's so popular now to discuss that we're living in a simulation, like, this is a computer, we're in a computer program on an alien spaceship in the future on another planet. Like I love that. It's so fun. But it's interesting that a lot of the discussion about simulation theory comes from this very cold, calculated computer architecture language. But the idea of a simulation has been around way before there were ever computers. I mean, this goes back to the ancient philosophical stuff about the idea, like the Plato's allegory of the cave. It's like what we're watching is like shadows on a wall. It's not the real world. And you have to eventually unchain yourself and get up and realize that there's puppeteers trying to, distract you, making shadows on the wall. That's not even really the sun. And you eventually climb out of the cave and you realize it's like, oh my God, here's the real world. But even that is another level of the simulation. A movie that describes that too is I don't know if you've seen it, but it's called Inception with Leonardo DiCaprio. It's this idea of dreams within dreams. The question of like, how do you know if you're not dreaming right now? Well, because it feels real. Yeah, but when you're in a dream, it also feels real. It's not until like little things start to happen that make you think, wait a minute, is this not right? This doesn't seem right. Or you actually become lucid in your dream and you can start controlling the nature of what's going on. And so, like what you were saying too, it's like, well, who gets to decide? Well, the thing is you get to decide. You get to decide, but also decisions implicitly make us think of the idea of control. Like, who has control? Who's in control here? Who's in charge? Well, the funny thing is like, no one's really in charge. It's like there are people in charge. You're in charge, but no one's in charge. It's very paradoxical, just like the term ancient future. They are simultaneous events. And the thing is that sometimes the ball is in your court and you get to make a decision. Other times the ball is not in your court and you have to play. Like in any game that involves a ball, like basketball or baseball or football or whatever, there are times when the ball is in play and you have to move around and be ready to react, be ready to perceive and to play and collaborate. But then there are other times where it's your turn and you have to go. So I think it comes time, space, nature, consciousness, human life, all that stuff. It kind of comes down to that idea. Again, the balance between the individual and the community. Right now, we have a disharmony within the individual and we have a disharmony within the community. This is not a great situation, but it is also a really incredible opportunity. It's one of those things like in a dream, like the world around us is starting to collapse. The reality is starting to collapse around us. Are we going to sit here and pretend like this is normal? Are we going to sit here and just accept it? I mean, it's happening in slow motion, as it were. So the thing is we have this great opportunity to become like in a dream, become lucid within the dream. Take control. Take control of at least your own life. Start from within. Recognize that there are boundaries. There's a boundary between in your skin between the inner world and the outer world. And then there are boundaries between one person and another person. Then there are boundaries between one community and another community. And then there are boundaries by which we don't even know what's on the other side. So you have to start from within first. It's all about having healthy boundaries. And you can tell there's an issue right now because some people see that boundary and they say, no more boundaries. We don't want boundaries. And then there's other people that say, no, we want to build a wall. We don't want anything coming in or anything going out. And both of those, in my opinion, are really bad, approaches. I'm not so sure it's an accident that's the choices that we are being suggested to make right now. I think it's it's not a coincidence because either way, no matter which one of those things you choose, it ends to the degradation of life. It leads to control, but not by us, by a small group of people that would rather us just either dissolve into nothing or be inside of a prison that we can't escape from. Either way, not good. It's all about healthy boundaries. And guess what? Like all of the wise mystics from thousands over the millennium have said the answers are within you in whatever language. Look at the cells, the cell membrane, or even your skin. Your skin is not just solid, nothing gets in, nothing gets out. The cell membrane is not just like a wall. There are gates and channels that will allow certain things to come in and will push other things out. It's got antennas on it that will respond to different signals. So it's again about having healthy boundaries. And right now, it's like we have to recognize that we are being programmed by the world around us. We're being programmed by our past. We're being programmed to expect a future that may or may not come. Like it's not a coincidence that in Hollywood, some of the most most of the movies, like the dystopian movies about the future, it's like a zombie apocalypse, or it's just like this is what the future will be like. Just constantly programming. This is what the future will look like, and it's going to be every man for himself out there. It's going to be this is how it's going to try. Trying to suggest to us in a hypnotic state, essentially, to expect something that this is what it's going to be, but it doesn't. It's not necessarily what it's going to be. We have to remember that we have the ability to let certain things in and also be able to say no to other things. Saying no is important, but also don't be all no or all yes. So to be a modern, future, ancient person means that you can learn from the past, but also understand that the future is not a real place. The future is not somewhere we're going. It's just a concept. There is no way to predict what's going to happen. Nothing is set in stone. It is absolutely just you have influence over what's going to happen. You know, there's that, again, that polarity. Is it fate or is it luck? You know, or like, are we predetermined or do we have a choice? Free will or fate, right? It's both, but in a different context. Free will doesn't necessarily mean we get to choose what's going to happen, but it does mean we get to choose how we respond to it. And through the nature of the interdynamic of everything, how we respond to nature actually gives us a say in what's going to happen next. Doesn't mean it's going to happen, but the more we come together in coherence within ourselves and within a community, then things will start to happen. We've done these pole shifts before. The ancient Greeks, when they looked at the past, they didn't look at it like we do today, like behind us. The past is behind us and we're walking forward into the future. That's the way we personify it today. The ancient Greeks saw it literally the opposite way, and it makes more sense. The ancient Greeks, they saw the past as in front of them, because just like your memories, if you were to close your eyes and remember something, you can visualize it. You can feel what you were feeling when you were there. You can hear what people were saying. Like there's a clarity, like as if you're looking at it. It was the future that was behind them. Just like no matter how much you try to see what's going to happen in the future, it's like trying to look over your shoulder. You don't have eyes in the back of your head. You can't see what's back there. So no matter what, you will end up being that dog chasing its tail. It's like death too. You know, it's like death is lurking up at any point. And so the real trick here, becoming a modern future agent, is comes down to movement. It's not about perspective, it's about movement. You know, if we're like today, if the future is in front of us and we're walking forward into something, we have no idea what's coming. You know, that's called walking blindly into the future. But also the other way, if we're talking about it from a past focused perspective, I'm trying to move away from that event in the past. Well, like we said before, everywhere you go, there you are. There is no escaping the past. And there is no getting to the future. So it's all about what? Instead of making steps forward and calling that progress, or like Hansel and Gretel and retracing your footsteps back to where you came from, you know, both can be enlightening in their own way, but perhaps we do something else. We just stop and stand in this moment and feel it for what's going on right now, and start to realize that your critical faculty skills are way better than you think they are when you're not moving. When you start to clear the mechanism of the monkey mind and just be for a second, it's like giving your computer a chance to process. That's why they say never eat food right before you go to sleep, because your body it's conflicting processes. You know, you want to make sure you do things at certain times. In our world today, we are constantly in movement. If we just stop and allow this thing to render, digest the time-space continuum for a second, we'll realize like, oh, okay, it's really not that bad. It really all just comes down to breathing. Like if we just learn how to let go and just breathe consciously, then you know what? A lot of these problems, they're not really problems anymore.
Absolutely. That was great information, Alex. It is getting close to 3 o'clock. We're going to be reading the first 4 chapters of Alex Lipton's new book. I'll just pull it up here onto the stage, FreeIncarnation. And let us know in the comments if you've subscribed to Alex's YouTube, because this book is going to be published very, very soon. And Alex, I'm sure he'll make a big announcement on YouTube. I'll be sure to put it inside my Buy Me a Coffee as well. So you want to get this book as soon as it's hot off the press. And I told Alex, those of you who are just tuning in now, that at 3 o'clock we would officially read those books, because you know how it is with me slipping into timelessness. But I thought about the present moment, right? And yes, this business of breath, and even like there's different breathing rhythms, like 4-4-4 breathing, 4-4-4-4 breathing, or there's the 7-7-7-7 breathing, and all these ways of breathing help us literally breathe and sink into that present moment, because the is The now is all there is. Nothing ever was or will be. It is, and it's that Venn diagram. Everything is-ing. It's in the now, and it springs forth just like that color purple. We have all the colors inside of us. So it's like Bugs Bunny. If Bugs Bunny needs a broom, boom, broom is in the hand, right? Don't need the broom anymore. The broom just goes back in. And that's like things in our lives that get projected and reflected. And so each and every single moment can be so pressing because it determines the next present moment. And it's in those really pressing moments that we get a little bit too disconnected. We're too much in survival mode that we forget that we have that power to just stand in our power, to stand in that present moment, and to really take charge of it, and to achieve the brain heart gut harmony, to send the universe a message that all systems are in check. And is this easy to do? No, it's not, you know. And do you have any thoughts, Alex, before I read over the chat here?
No, let's do it. Let's go through the chat.
Okay. So I've been putting some comments up there. I won't reread those, but lots of hype over movies. So it's nice that the audience is connecting with Alex about that. Probably just, have Alex live one time just to talk about movies. If you feel like the Dragon Dreamers here would really appreciate that. And especially folks who have interesting dreams, have a hard time finding the words. Movies and images really help to find a language, you know? So where was I here? Okay, yeah, so Elf. So Julia Anchorhaven commenting that Elf was her favorite show as a kid. And I wonder, Julia, if you're talking about Elf, that brown alien guy, because I used to love Elf. And you know what? When I was a kid, I thought that was the future. Like this was normal, like Pokeroo and, just part of everyday life, like, like Sesame Street, right? Mickey Mouse. Aren't those folks real? And Jason also remembering. And then Alex, there's a comment here about Daryl. Resonated deeply because of the My Lab stuff as a kid. So I guess you watch shows like Scooby-Doo and that as a child, Alex, and this business of Daryl. Anchorhaven's commenting that she loves Star Trek and commenting on some cool scenes beyond with that. And also commenting that Alex is on fire. And you know what? This is just Alex all of the time. This is normal Alex. So Alex is always pumped up, has great energy. And Julia commenting, lots of people brought in on Paperclip, also placed in a bunch of CEO roles. Just going back to that conversation earlier, shadows on the wall, and who do you trust? There was another one in here though. Has Alex been on the Typical Skeptic podcast with Robert Khalil? No. So definitely have to get in touch with Rob. I've been on his show a handful of times, and I'm guilty of recruiting folks on Rob's show onto Story Species, Story Medicine. So that's exciting. Get Alex there. And Alex, what do you think about like this business of off-world Germans? And then I'll get into to reading. And
Yeah.
Alex does have a camper van. Maybe tell us a little bit about that too quickly before we get into the reading. We will definitely have Alex back, okay, Dragon Dreamers?
Yeah. Okay. Well, first I'll give you just a short tour of my van here. It's called the Nautilus, based on Captain Nemo's amazing submarine, the Nautilus, in 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. But this was I designed this for podcasting, video editing, doing energy, psychology, hypnotism type stuff, tarot cards. But I do my podcast in here as well. Got a really cool lighting, and of course the pattern from The Shining on the ceiling, the carpet. But it was actually not just from The Shining. This was from one of my favorite documentaries, Room 237, which is the theory about how Stanley Kubrick actually shot the moon landing and made and told the public about it subconsciously through the movie The Shining, which is why The Shining was not at all like the book that Stephen King wrote. It was a completely different movie because Stanley Kubrick had to covertly tell people the show people like that he shot the moon landing, and that this pattern is actually an overview shot of the launch pad from Apollo 11. But anyway, that's my van. And on that note, you know, about space, yeah, Germans in space. Well, there is a totally alternate version reality of the 20th century and the late 19th century that we have no idea about. And only today we're starting to see, like I was saying before, the board members and the shareholders trying to basically do a disclosure. Well, there's a breakaway civilization. This group called the Thule Society and the Frill Society. They worked with the Nazis, part of this discovery of ancient lost technology and making contact with other worldly intelligences and developing anti-gravitic technology at the end of World War II. And there was a breakaway civilization. Where, I mean, essentially just think about it, there were German U-boats that were retrofitted with anti-gravitic technology that were sent off-world before the end of World War II, like in the 1930s, and had already reached Mars and the asteroid belt by that point. And the space program, as we've known it in America, it was a public space program that Kennedy inherited the knowledge through when Eisenhower said the military-industrial complex is a big problem. He was really referring to this breakaway Nazi group that's based in Antarctica that had already developed a base on the moon at that point, in the shape of a swastika, by the way. So when JFK was saying, well, we're going to build this public space program, this is sort of a reboot of the ancient biblical story of the Tower of Babel, which has a lot of meaning to it and the tarot cards and whatnot. But that was essentially a god named Marduk working with Nimrod and to build a tower to reach the heavens, because the other gods, the other Anunnaki, they controlled the space program. They were the only ones that were allowed to go from the surface to the moon, which was their base, and beyond. Whereas Marduk, who was leading a rebellion against that particular faction of the Illuminati or the Anunnaki, Illuminati is a legacy of that story in the modern day. And then what happens? The Tower of Babel is, I mean, that the Tower card is probably one of the worst cards you can get in a tarot reading. It's not the Death card; it's the Tower card, because what happens is God, which is not really God, it was one of these Anunnaki dudes, came down and destroyed the space program. Said, no, you humans can't build a space program. We control the skies. And so anyway, the modern 20th century with the Nazi influence in outer space, I mean, you know, again, movies come down to it. They revealed all of this through the Captain America trilogy. Every single Captain America movie reveals the hidden history about how there's a secret Nazi group operating in the shadows, controlling the intelligence agencies and the space program. So yeah, we got Nazis in space. Go figure.
That's amazing information. And for what it's worth, like, were we judged perhaps or being controlled? It just really opens up a can of worms for me. And it's a good thing Alex remembers all those big words and the interconnectedness of things, which is something I appreciate about folks like Alex and folks like myself who can't keep track. You know, I used to be really hard on myself for that, but now I'm loving it because I feel a lot freer. And when it comes to missions and roles, mine is not the details and names. But what I would really like to do now is read over the introduction of, or the summary of Alex's book. A question though, Alex, FreeIncarnation, it's spelled as one word. And I was wondering, is that just how things turned out on the title, or was that intention to be like one word? Any thoughts on that?
On FreeIncarnation as one word? Yeah, so obviously it's a play on words, and it's the core idea of the philosophical project that this book is all about, breaking the cycles of repetition, where reincarnation, of course, has been a controversial idea throughout like the West. I mean, this is not controversial at all in the East. And then indigenous cultures, and if you go deeper, which I do in my book later on, the origins of Christianity was very much influenced by the philosophic world of antiquity, and the studies of Plato and all these people. Reincarnation was absolutely a part of the secret teachings of the early Christians before Christianity was really a word. So the thing is, reincarnation, I like to say, when I'm describing my book to people, when people have heard of reincarnation, it's like, oh, when you hear about reincarnation, people are always saying, well, oh, I was so and so in a past life. And usually it's like somebody important or famous, or like I was a spiritual warrior in Atlantis in the past life, or I was Napoleon or something. Yeah. And what I would ask people, though, is, yeah, but who's going to be you? Who are you going to be the past life of? Like, who's you in the future? And it's like, oh, I didn't think about that. Point is about reincarnation comes down to this idea of karma, that your life is a result of the past. And of course, we come into this world based on prerequisites of things that involve choices and experiences and whatever, trauma a lot of times. But I think that we need to recognize that reincarnation in a lot of ways is a cycle of constant repetition. I like to think of reincarnation in a lot of ways as like the never-ending Mission Impossible franchise. you're just Tom Cruise is back, and Tom Cruise is not anymore. We got a new Tom Cruise, like James Bond, a new James Bond, wearing different clothes, different actor, same character in the modern timeline, over and over and over again. Free incarnation is a combination of understanding a reframing of that to the present moment, and to include freedom in the title, that you're not just a result of your past, you're a result of what you do now, and what comes in the future is very much influenced by who you are in the present moment. That even in the so-called afterlife, you're still in the present moment. And that what you do in the afterlife, how you respond to the afterlife conditions, which the Tibetans call the bardo state, depending on how you respond in that moment, will influence what happens next. And there are rulers, the Gnostics and the ancient Greeks, they called them archons. Archon means ruler. They exist in our reality now and in the reality that happens when we pass through this filter of this body, and will present themselves as our ancestors. Or if you're a Christian, Jesus might show up. If you're a Muslim, Muhammad might show up. Or if you're an alien will show up, and they'll kind of curate and direct you to what you should do next. Remember, do the life review. Well, the thing is maybe, like, in the earlier chats, like, don't go to the light. Well, perhaps the light is a tractor beam to keep us in a repetitive loop. So instead of being a result of your past, what if you are the past, present, future all in one moment, and that you get to choose now? That's kind of what that means.
Wow, that was a great answer. Let's start reading Alex's book. It's called FreeIncarnation, A Guide to Ending the War on Consciousness. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to read the summary, and then I will turn it over to Alex. Then I will read again, and then we can get into questions. And so as Alex or myself are reading, put your questions in the comments, and give us a little bit of time to go through the material, and then we'll go back and read them over. And again, we'll definitely have Alex back here. Where did my teleprompter go now? Aha, okay. In theory, I'm organized. I'm still getting used to StreamYard. If anybody out there is looking for a platform, StreamYard, I recommend it. It's user-friendly. All right, I'm excited to read this. Reincarnation is a philosophical and experiential guide to ending the war on consciousness. It challenges the deepest myths of separation, life versus death, self versus others, versus the human body, human versus machine, and reveals them as illusions created by misperception rather than truth. Blending personal memoir, mythology, Gnosticism, psychology, cinema, and modern media analysis, Reincarnation reframes reality as a participatory dream rather than a fixed system. Death is not the opposite of life. The self is not isolated from the world, and time is not linear, but holographic. Through stories, symbols, and cultural archetypes, from ancient gods to Hollywood films, The book shows how authority worship and unconscious narratives shape perception and behavior. At its core, reincarnation is not about escape or transcendence, but integration, awakening within the dream, reclaiming ethical responsibility without fear, and realizing freedom not as rebellion against reality, but as clarity about how reality works. It invites readers to stop waiting for saviors, stop fighting imagined enemies, and remember who they are beneath the trance, co-creators in an unfolding conscious universe. That was beautifully written, Alex.
Thank
And
you.
so what we're going to do now is I'm going to completely remove myself from this stage. You'll feel totally alone, but I'm right here, Alex. So if you're like, Gina, come on the stage with me, I'll pop right on with you. But it's always a treat just to have you on there. Alex is going to read chapters 1 to 3 from FreeIncarnation. And then I'm going to read chapter 4. So Alex, just let us know when you get to chapter 2 and when you get to chapter 3, because if anybody wants to follow along when they do get the book, it's always nice to read with the author. I used to do that on Linda Moulton Howe's Earth Files. I ordered her books, and then the day she pulled out her books and started reading, I ran so fast to grab my copy, and it was the coolest thing. And so I want to remind readers that FreeIncarnation, it's not available yet. It's just me hounding Alex behind the scenes to come on my show. And so without further ado, I'm going to remove myself. And here is Alex Lipton reading chapters 1 to 3 from FreeIncarnation, a guide to ending the war on consciousness.
Gina, thank you so much. This is a wonderful opportunity to share this with everybody as we are as we're in this amazing, chaotic, and beautiful world that I hope that this book will hopefully give a nice compliment, at least give some smiles. But yeah, thank you for reading that description, and I will proceed and tell you how it goes here. So, title: FreeIncarnation, a guide to ending the war on consciousness. Chapter 1, 20 to 12, and the illusion of time. Excuse me. I was 16 the night I first started to suspect that time wasn't quite what we thought it was. Every New Year's Eve, my friends would come over, we'd load up on pizza rolls, chips and soda, and do whatever teenagers do. Laugh, listen to music, watch the ball drop, and pretend we understood more about the world than we did. Hold on, excuse me, just drink some water. Sorry, gotta take your water breaks. Okay, but as we got a little older and began experimenting with marijuana, our traditions shifted into something more exploratory. Unlike many of our fellow classmates who had access to alcohol, we, probably for the best, did not. Myself and our small but tight friend group were more interested in playing music as a band and going to indie rock shows, as well as engaging in what would become my future career path, making movies on the weekends. This type of creative lifestyle lent itself much more naturally to the world of smoking weed. Excuse me. Inspired by a story my dad told me about a little secret society he and his high school friends were a part of, YOUR, short for Lazy Old Bastard Society, which was the continuation of a club his older brother, my Uncle Bruce, started with the same name. My friends and I decided to start our own version, YOUR, where their version involved drinking beer and talking about high school crushes. Ours took a slightly more cosmic turn. That New Year's Eve in 2004, we decided that we'd initiate our chapter of LOBs with our new friend, marijuana. Of course, it was imperative that we keep our weed smoking shenanigans concealed from my parents, so we set up a buddy system in my room. We were getting stoned, giggling, and very intent on maintaining a system. Keep a lookout, just in case my parents were to check in on us. Of course, we were intent on watching the ball drop because the new year was imminent. We were very much on the clock. As one or two of us would go into my bedroom and take a hit off the devil's lettuce, someone would always stand guard by the door. Every time someone emerged from my bedroom and glanced at the wall clock, they'd say, "It's 11:40." We would take turns, and as we would rotate, no one person asked the same person twice what time it was. We were very much in some kind of stoner time warp. Things got very goofy, to say the least. And again, someone would come out of my room, eyes squinty and red, look at the clock, and pronounce the time. "It's 20 to 12. Every time, over and over. It became a running joke. "It's still 20 to 12. We have plenty of time." Eventually, we all gathered on a couch in a haze, fully expecting the ball to drop any minute. Our touchstone of reality was focused entirely on the TV's blue input screen, a type of canvas for our minds, which were ablaze. Suddenly, we could hear the footsteps of my mom coming downstairs. As she turned the corner into the living room, we hardly reacted. She gave us a look and asked what we were doing. We told her, "It's 20 to 12. The ball's about to drop." I'll always remember the look on my mom's face. She belted out one of her signature laughs and blinked and said, "Guys, it's 1:18 in the morning." We sat there stunned. How could this be? I thought. Somehow we had completely missed the new year, not because we lost track of time, but because the batteries in the clock had died at 11:40. The illusion had held for hours. This was mind-blowing, to say the least, and as the night continued, we laughed at ourselves and pondered the meaning of why this happened. Ultimately, our laughter echoed into the night. It became our tradition. Every New Year's, and for that matter, anytime the clock struck 11:40, we would nod to each other in school as if it was a code, or the equivalent of a fraternal handshake in our budding secret society, Lobs 3. For the next few years, Lobs 3 celebrated midnight at 20 to 12. Right before the ball would drop at 11:40 p.m., the lobsters in the room would all erupt into celebration for 20 to 12. In a public setting like school or someone else's New Year's Eve party, people thought we were out of our minds. And admittedly, we kind of were. Often people would ask, "Why do you celebrate New Year's at 20 to 12? We told people we were on a different kind of time. They laughed, but we meant it. Somewhere deep inside, we knew we were onto something, even though we didn't consciously know what that was. A few years later, earlier in the days of the emergent era of internet searches, I came home from school and typed something random into Google. 20 to 12. I didn't know why, I just felt like it. What came up changed everything. Pages and pages of results about the Mayan calendar. Prophecies of the world as we know it ending in the year 2012. I was truly shocked. In a whirlwind of deja vu and synchronicity, 20 to 12 took on a whole new meaning. What started off as a stoner joke had become a living metaphor for something deeper. The breakdown of linear time, the entrance into a new paradigm of consciousness, not to mention the fact that us lobsters, members of the secret society, knew the truth of it all. Looking back at these series of events, I can't help but notice that this is where I began my journey down the rabbit hole of conspiracies. As I sat at that computer with my eyes wide open, I was beginning to suspect that the clock didn't die by accident. That moment marked the beginning of my spiritual awakening, and I've been on that journey ever since. As we go down the rabbit hole together, we shall uncover even more lessons that the time 11:40 or 20 to 12 has to offer. What does 20 to 12 tell us about the sinking of the Titanic? How about the movie Gremlins? You may be just as surprised as I was to discover these trippy yet profound insights can help us make sense of our current reality and how to transcend its limitations. The mind is the real gateway drug that opens us up to realms which have either been forgotten or in actuality hidden away from us. Now is the time to truly accept the great calling from beyond our awareness, a time for shedding illusions. What if everything you've been taught about death, about the self, about time was inverted? What if your deepest fears were rooted not in reality, but a misunderstanding of what it means to be alive? FreeIncarnation was born from this question, not as an answer, but as a doorway. I didn't come to write this book because I had it all figured out. I wrote it because in some quiet, startling moments, grief-stricken, joy-filled, or in just disoriented by time itself, I caught glimpses of something ancient, a knowing, a memory not from this life, but through it. Something that whispered, you've never been separate, you've never been alone, and you've never truly began. Time is not what it seems. When we look around at the world we currently inhabit, with all the disparities of war, poverty, loneliness, corruption, fears, and anxieties, we must ask ourselves, is this the best we can do? Objectively speaking, there absolutely are forces at play who seek to exploit our differences and lack of trust in ourselves in order to manipulate our behavior towards a destination that can be best described as slavery. Specifically, the enslavement of our minds. It is time to call a wrap on the vicious cycles of duality, the so-called differences between cause and effect, chicken or the egg conundrum. Which comes first? Which is at the top? Which one do we prioritize our focus? What I am describing is a war on consciousness. How do we end the war? Is that our goal? Is there at least a way in which we can no longer feel the need to take sides in a conflict that should not be a conflict in the first place? This project of FreeIncarnation matters in all the ways you can imagine. We need to break free from the shackles of false realities and misguided truths and do it in a way where we can keep our feet on the ground as to not be flung aimlessly into the void of the unknown. It may feel like we are falling, which is why we need to remember how to fly. We've been taught that time is a straight line, that the self ends at the skin, that death is the final curtain in the play of our lives. But what if those are just stories we've inherited from a world that forgot how to employ the innate power of imagination into reality? FreeIncarnation is not a book of answers. It's a guide to remembering something, a way of seeing, feeling, and living in a world where separation is the illusion and unity through balance is the reality that's been ever present all along. This is not a book about what happens after we die. It's a book about how we live when we remember that death is not to be feared as the end of life. It will become clear how death is actually the opposite of birth. To exit one thing and enter another mean the very same thing. This so-called polarity is a hidden threshold. That thing we call life, the thing we venerate as true, is just as valuable as the thing that we fear to be the end. The unity we seek is within what we call death. When we put the two together, it is revealed that they are the very nature of being itself. What we are seeing and seeking is the whole field. This is not a book about mere ego death or spiritual bypassing either. It's about reclaiming the deeper self, the one that doesn't end at the skin or the name or even the story. The self that includes the other, the self that recognizes the mirror in every relationship, and the self that is the environment. This is not a book, and this is not a book that follows time's straight arrow. Because time doesn't move forward like a train on tracks. It folds, echoes, and refracts. It is holographic, which means the past is not behind us and the future is not ahead, and you are not bound to the script you were handed. We may have been conditioned to live inside a myth, perhaps a myth of separation. Separation between body and soul, self and others, life and death, now and then. This myth would keep us afraid. If we would keep forgetting, living in a constant dichotomy or in an incessant and strictly polar world of on versus off and yes versus no, positive versus negative. But you can remember. I want to emphasize again, this book is a guide, not to teach you something new, but to remind you of something you already know and perhaps have always known, to awaken the part of you that has never been born and will never die. This part that watches the waves rise and fall, but knows it is the ocean of consciousness. It's all consciousness. What follows is not a linear argument. That would be easy. If I could tell you how it is, I'd be off the hook. Just a simple transaction. I give, you take, all is done. No. This takes a level of commitment that transcends the responsibility of a single person. FreeIncarnation is a spiraling pattern of return. Similar to the journey Hansel and Gretel take on their way back home, we will follow the breadcrumbs through history as we return to our true origin. And as we shall see, it's a home we never truly left. Using the universal language of movies, we will move through this story with potentially new lenses of perception. These so-called boundaries of separation can be renewed, not as things to fear, but as keys to our freedom. Because when we unchain ourselves from the myths of separation, we discover a hidden reality. We are not tyrannical victims, nor the pitiful oppressors, and most importantly, we cannot claim to be the ultimate saviors. We are co-creators of a life that demands eternal vigilance, and that is the hardest truth to grasp. And now we're ready to remember. When we unchain ourselves from the myths of separation, we don't just free our minds, we are being. We don't just free our minds, we free our being. And in the freedom, we may begin to realize we were never alone, we are never temporary, and most importantly, if we choose to realize it, we were never lost. Immortal we already are. Chapter 2, Go When It Happens. The night the clock stopped at 20 to 12 wasn't just a funny stoner story. It became something far more enduring. A symbol, a glitch in the ordinary, a kind of cosmic nudge that time, real time, was not what I thought it was. That moment, frozen at 11:40 p.m., echoed with a resonance I didn't yet understand, but I felt it deep in my gut that something was beginning. This marked the moment I unknowingly crossed the threshold, out of childhood and into a lifelong awakening. That experience at 15 was like glimpsing the first star appearing in the night sky at dusk. I didn't know what was to come, but I knew I was about to enter a shimmering new state of mind. From that moment forward, I began to sense that reality was layered, eerily symbolic, and perhaps most powerfully responsive. But really, the seed for this whole perception shift was planted much earlier. One of the earliest moments I can remember that cracked open my perception that came long before long before I ever thought about synchronicity or time as an illusion. I was just a kid sitting on the couch with my parents watching Michael Jackson's Thriller music video. To say I was terrified is an understatement. The zombies, the growling, the transformation scenes, it all felt too real to me. I remember burying my face in my hands, peeking through my fingers, only when I thought it was safe. My parents encouraged me to keep watching, telling me, just wait till the end. They weren't just talking about the video. At the very end, after the credits rolled, what played next on the tape was the making of documentary. Suddenly, the entire world I had just been terrified by flipped inside out. I saw the king of pop himself laughing with the crew. He was surrounded by artists transforming people into monsters. The truth was clear in the form of cameras, sets, lights, and everything all around. An unmistakably highly practical magic behind the illusion. That moment was more than just comforting. It was revelatory. I realized that even the scariest, most convincing realities can be deconstructed. That behind the terror was a story, and behind that story was a mechanism. There was something about seeing the layers of the illusion that imprinted on me. Over time, this led to my obsession with the idea of how reality is created, through storytelling, through perception, and more honestly, through belief. It was also the moment I knew I wanted to make movies. I began to dream that it's possible to create worlds beyond what we can imagine. But more importantly, as a kid, it was probably the first moment I started to question what was real. And that question, what is real, would follow me for the rest of my life. By the time I reached senior year of high school, the patterns had become harder to ignore. Synchronicity was no longer a curiosity, it had become a language. Time, once linear and predictable, now moved with rhythm and correspondence. Reality started speaking in symbols, in clocks, numbers, signs, and stories. And for better or worse, I started to listen. This chapter picks up at that turning point, senior year in my hometown, New York. The place where the universe somehow showed up in back roads and movie screens, through license plates and midnight movies. This is where I began to realize that life wasn't just happening to me, it was happening with me. I grew up in Mayapack, a quiet, woodsy suburb in New York. This is where I really began to explore the concept and experience of synchronicity. At first, it was small things. Things you could say were silly. I started seeing the same license plate, DEK, on different cars all over town. Didn't mean much at first, but it always seemed to appear when my friends and I were deep in thought or faced with a decision. We'd laugh it off at times, but somewhere deep down we knew it was a sign. A sign from what? The universe, aliens, our future selves? We didn't know, but we definitely trusted it. And then there was the time, always, again and again, at the most pivotal, intimate, uncanny moments. There it was, 11:40 p.m., 20 to 12. The same moment the clock stopped years ago before in that lobstery stoner haze. An obscure and oddly random time, which continued to grow in significant ways. During my time in high school, I started to explore astrology, an unexpected tool for expanding my understanding of personality and archetype. It opened up a portal, not into belief, but into relationship, into the realization that maybe we're not in the universe as isolated observers. Maybe we are the universe, reflecting itself back through our charts, our choices, and our chance encounters. Astrology gave me an outlet to explore the deeper meaning of things. I remember when I first gazed upon my own chart, I was in perpetual amazement, reckoning with the fact that it was so damned exact. Sure, astrology can be very vague and generalized as to elicit such a reaction. Like how a fortune cookie can tell you the future. It is easy to dismiss. But as I started to study the planets and their meanings, I began to accept the idea that astrology is more complex than a fortune cookie. It's a tool to understanding our relationship to the source of divinity. I was raised as a Roman Catholic, same as my mom, and my dad came from a Jewish background. Our family wasn't deeply religious, but I always felt some interconnection with the divine. All throughout my indoctrination into Christianity, I was faced with a deep, toiling skepticism of the institutions of religion. For example, my CCD teachers would tell me that my dad was going to burn in hell because he didn't accept Jesus as Lord and Savior. In my heart, I knew this wasn't true, but my head was spinning. It didn't make sense to me that someone who didn't even know my dad could so casually condemn him to eternal damnation. Based on what? The words written by men thousands of years ago? Yet, nothing I was taught in CCD could prepare me for what I was beginning to experience directly. What I was feeling didn't fit into doctrine, it fit into everything. In those days, I found myself constantly in dialogue with something larger. I'd ask a question, and the answer would appear, not in words, but in coincidence. Truth would emerge in places like clocks, street signs, and song lyrics. You know, all the places your parents might say you're just vessels of adolescence. The answers weren't always clear, but they were unmistakably timed. And so my friends and I made up a phrase for it. Whenever one of these moments hit, a moment that stopped us and humbled us or made us laugh and look up, we'd say, "Go when it happens." It was a motto, our spell to surrender the mystery. And then one night, I was watching one of my favorite films, Titanic, again. I had always been obsessed with the ship from a young age, drawn to its tragic beauty, its scale, its symbolism. I used to draw the ship obsessively, watch every documentary I could find, and of course, wore out the VHS tapes of the movie. But this time was different. It was the scene of the collision, the iceberg, the moment everything changes. The officer yells to log the time of impact. 11:40 p.m. I sat straight up. My skin buzzed and I actually said out loud, "Seriously? 20 to 12 again?" The Titanic struck the iceberg at the exact time the clock had died years earlier during our New Year's ritual. The same time I kept seeing everywhere. And then I realized the ship went down in 1912. Exactly 100 years before the Mayan end date calendar of 2012. Another echo reverberating beyond the threshold of sanity. I wondered, is this another layer? But damn, what did the Titanic symbolize? Human hubris? The illusion of invincibility? Unsinkable. Think about it. I sure did. But no matter how advanced, no matter how confident, if you ignore the iceberg, reality, you will sink. It all seemed connected. I couldn't explain it to my parents, dare I try to explain it to my friends. Regardless the fact I didn't need to. It wasn't for them, it was for me, and it was real. You could call it coincidence, that's fair, but I was living in something bigger than that. There was meaning here, something pulsing through my being that resonated with a vision that I could feel, yet I could not articulate. It was happening in the world, and it was happening in me. One night I was watching the movie Gremlins, another movie I'd seen dozens of times, and something jumped out that I'd never noticed. The rule: don't feed them after midnight. You know the scene. The cute mogwai have multiplied, and now the new gremlins are whining and yelping, begging to be fed. The main character, Billy, frustrated, gives in and feeds them some cold chicken. He glances at the clock. It's 11:40 p.m. Again, 20 to 12. Of course, we find out later that the gremlins had unplugged the clock. It was actually after midnight. The rule had been broken, and the transformation had begun. Just like with Titanic, the moment of change happened at 20 to 12. And it wasn't just dramatic. The omniscient gods of synchronicity had spoken, albeit through metaphor. It was fate. What's Gremlins about, really? Transformation? Repression turning monstrous? The chaos that emerges when the rules of reality are ignored. And again, the catalyst was a broken clock at 11:40 p.m., just like mine. In both stories, however strangely distant they are in tone, Titanic and Gremlins exemplify what happens when warnings go unheeded and a threshold is crossed. This is where everything changes. What is the Mayan 2012 date if not the same message? A transformation, a change from one thing into another. The plot thickens in a very particular way. For better or worse, a cocoon cracks open. Senior year was trippy, to say the least. It was as if I took the infamous red pill from Morpheus in the Matrix. But the only difference was that this was a time-release pill. Soon enough, I would become consumed with a lifelong obsession with the lost civilization of Atlantis, and in the coming chapters, I will share the deeper effects of this rite of passage, how it would take hold of me, and how my consciousness would be forever altered. Still, it was only the beginning, but these experiences laid the groundwork for a lifelong question. Is this world solid, stable, and linear, or is it in some way like a movie? A movie we're not just watching, but we're living in it? Have you ever been in a theater at some point wondering what happens next? They say the movies are a great way to live vicariously through characters of imagination. But the question comes down to a thing we call choice. Did you choose this plot? Did you choose these characters? Is this what you wanted to happen? If you're choosing who's directing, can we, and why? I started to wonder if we could re-edit the scenes of our lives, rewrite the scripts we've inherited. Maybe we don't have to repeat the tragedies. Perhaps if we learn about the mechanics of reality, the universe, instead of being manipulated by it. Go when it happens. That phrase has stayed with me. It's about trust. It's about saying yes to the signs, even if you don't understand them yet. Because the truth is, you don't always get the meaning in the moment. Sometimes the moment just leaves a mark, a quantum bullshit ripple that leaves a splinter in your mind. And later, days, years, or even decades, you might realize that was the beginning of something. Or an ending, if you allow yourself to listen. Okay, here's chapter 3. Thanks for bearing with me. I feel like if my voice is starting to go a little bit here, but thank you. Let's see.
This is really great, Alex. Keep reading, really enjoying it. And we're listening to Chapter 3, FreeIncarnation, A Guide to Ending the War on Consciousness, written by Alex Lipton. And when Alex is finished reading Chapter 3, it's going to be my pleasure to read Chapter 4. Thanks, Alex.
Awesome. Thank you. All right, cool. Let's keep moving. This is fun. I haven't really actually read this whole thing out loud with my voice, so this is kind of a fun exercise anyway. Okay. Chapter 3, Down the Rabbit Hole. For as long as I can remember, my dream was to go to film school, to learn the craft of storytelling, to be part of that world where imagination and reality catalyze on the big screen. From the first time I saw Thriller and witnessed the transformation from everyday to extraordinary, I was hooked. I used to go to my friend Mike's house on the weekends, and we would use a VHS camcorder to record little skits on tape. This is how we would make our imaginations come to life. We didn't know the extent of the implications at the time, but we had a grasp on the fact that every time we rolled the camera, there was a sense of magic in the air. Before I ever questioned reality, I tried to measure it. As a child, I wanted to be a scientist, not in the abstract sense, but in the cinematic sense. Science to me wasn't equations and lab coats, it was wonder in motion. When I saw tornadoes, I wanted to chase them. When I saw volcanoes, I wanted to stand at their edge. The earth itself seemed alive, expressive and dramatic, like it was constantly trying to say something. Movies didn't just inspire these interests, they installed them. Each new film didn't merely entertain me, it temporarily reprogrammed my future. For a while, I wasn't imagining myself watching the world, I was imagining myself in it, studying it, naming it, explaining it. Science felt like the closest thing to magic that adults were allowed to believe in. And if things had unfolded differently, I probably would have grown up to be a weatherman, standing in front of a green screen, pointing at storms I didn't control, narrating chaos from a safe distance. But then there was Mike. Mike wasn't a scientist, and he didn't explain the world to me, he opened it. If I were forced to use mythic language, as I often am, I'd say this plainly. Mike was the shaman of creativity in my life. Not because he taught me technique, but because he taught me how to give permission. When I went to his house as a kid, something felt different immediately. It wasn't just the environment, it was the orientation. Reality seemed to be more flexible there, less fixed, more playful. We weren't trying to become anything, we were actually doing it. So Mike had this VHS camera, and that detail matters more than it should. The first time we made movies together, something quietly rearranged itself inside me. I didn't have language for it yet, but the realization was simple and total. I'm a filmmaker. I don't have to choose one path. I can become all of them. With a camera, I didn't have to chase tornadoes. I could summon them. I didn't have to study volcanoes. I could enter them. And I didn't have to explain the mystery. I could frame it. Science wanted answers, but film wanted experiences. And experience, I would later learn, is the real currency of consciousness. But the most important moment didn't happen behind the camera. It happened upside down. We were kids sprawled across in his living room on the couch, as the way kids do, bored, loose and unguarded, and at some point we ended up hanging backward off the cushions with our heads inverted, and the room flipped on its axis. And suddenly the world made a different kind of sense. The ceiling became the floor, and objects seemed to fall upward. This remote control appeared to drift towards the sky. Nothing had actually changed, and gravity was doing exactly what it always had done, but we had moved. And in that inversion, something clicked, not as a thought, but as a knowing. Reality isn't fixed, perspective is. What looked impossible was simply a matter of orientation. What looked magical was just physics viewed from a different angle. And the world hadn't lied to us. We had just assumed it could only be seen one way. That moment became a quiet cornerstone of everything that followed, not because we articulated, but because we lived it. We understood instinctively that the world we were living in was partly imaginary, not the sense that it wasn't real, but in the sense that it was co-created. What we perceived as real could be rearranged, reframed, and reauthored. This was creativity before ego, before the purposes, and magic before mythology. Later, film school would give us language, and adulthood would give us doubt. The world would offer us rules, roles, and responsibilities. But that upside-down moment stayed with me, because it revealed a truth that I could spend years circling back toward. You don't escape the world by going down the rabbit hole. You realize the rabbit hole was always the entrance. Mike didn't turn me into a filmmaker. He showed me that identity itself is movable camera. And once you understand that, once you realize that perception edits reality, you're no longer limited to forecasting the storm. You can step inside of it. You can film it, and you can become it. The idea that you could create a whole world from scratch, layer illusion over reality, and make people believe in something just by the power of perception, that was the kind of magic I wanted to master. Moving to California felt like a natural next step. Hollywood was the epicenter of storytelling, the place where dreams were captured on celluloid, projected onto the collective imagination. I was ready for it, or at least I thought I was. But life had its own script, and sometimes it throws in plot twists you couldn't possibly predict. The first time my parents and I flew out to look at houses, I remember feeling like we were about to step through a portal. I imagined palm trees swaying in the breeze, listening to the latest tunes from the Flaming Lips, seeing Spanish-style homes with arched doorways and ticky-tacky roofs. And at first it seemed like I was right. One of the first houses we visited was truly California iconic. Fruit trees, heavy with oranges and lemons, grapevines knotted along the outside window. It was like something out of a movie, and I was already picturing myself there, setting up a little desk by the window, writing my first script. But just like that, the dream unraveled. At the last minute, the owner decided not to sell. It felt like a cosmic tease, like I had been shown a glimpse of paradise only to have it yanked away. We flew back to New York, disappointed. My parents were determined to find something just as good, but I was not so optimistic. Nothing could compare to that oasis. Moving from New York to California felt kind of like stepping off the edge of the map. Mayapack had been my whole world, quiet, woodsy, and familiar. But now I was about to swap the dense forests and frozen winters for palm trees and year-round sun. It was the stuff of a teenage dream, but I was leaving everything I knew behind. My girlfriend, my friends, family, all the places where synchronicities had first begun to whisper to me. It wasn't a clean break, though. Since the first attempt to find a house fell through, my parents and I needed to fly back to California to try again. Only this time, I had to take time away from school. And to my disappointment, I actually had to do homework while I was house hunting. It would have been preferable to just enjoy the time like a vacation, but no. It was my senior year, and I'd signed up for a creative writing class. The main project I was assigned while I ventured to Cali was a long-term writing project. And I knew instantly what I was going to write about. Atlantis. The idea had been marinating in my mind for a little while. Thinking back, it must have been imprinted on me from watching that Disney animated film, Atlantis, The Lost Empire. The story of a lost civilization submerged under waves, but somehow still alive in the collective memory of humankind. A civilization advanced beyond our understanding, a utopia destroyed by its own hubris. It felt like the perfect metaphor for, well, everything. The world, my world, even the move to California felt symbolic, like I was diving beneath the surface of something I had only skimmed before. While on the flight to San Diego, I started sketching out scenes, grand temples, glass dome cities, technology, so seamless it looked like magic. Once we landed, my parents and I met with my grandma Gladys, my dad's mom. She lived in a sweet condo right on the Pacific Ocean in Carlsbad, and in that morning, we started to look for houses. Grandma Gladys took me to Barnes & Noble and bought me a book on Atlantis to help me with my research. She said, "I thought this might help you with your story." It felt like a blessing, like she was handing me a key to some secret archive of ancient wisdom. With my head full of stories of sunken cities and forgotten worlds, my parents and I got in the car with a real estate agent to find our future home. My expectations were high. Too high, probably. After seeing the first house, everything seemed dull by comparison. I lugged my Atlantis book around with me to every viewing, half reading, half dreaming, not really caring about the houses we toured. Nothing lived up to that fantasy I'd built in my mind. Until we walked in that house. I didn't even notice it at first. We walked in, and I sat on the couch, book open in my lap, barely paying attention while my parents toured the house. I was buried in a passage about the architecture of Atlantis, with white marble pillars, submerged courtyards, mosaics of gods and sea creatures. I must have read the same paragraph at least 3 times before my mom came out of the hallway, or with her eyes wide. She says, "Alex, you have to see the bathroom." I looked up, not quite registering her excitement. "The bathroom?" She goes, "Yes, come in." I stood up, still holding the Atlantis book, and followed her down the hall. I stepped inside and stopped in my tracks. The walls were covered in murals of underwater scenes, columns wrapped in seaweed, sunlight filtering through imagined water, ancient architecture crumbling in the depths. It was Atlantis. I was standing in the exact place I had just been reading about. The woman who owned the house came in behind us, beaming with pride. said, "I designed it myself," she said. "Always been fascinated with Atlantis, though I thought it'd make a good theme for the bathroom." I stared at her stunned. What were the odds? I was just reading about Atlantis right at that moment, and here I was, standing in its echo. I could feel that familiar electricity, that same sensation I had when the clock stopped at 20 to 12. When I saw 11:40 again and again, of course, these are coincidences by definition, but my imagination got me pretty excited. Is this a sign? I thought. And it didn't stop there. I walked back into the living room, still reeling, when my dad called me. He was standing with the owner's husband near the side door. "You have to see the laundry room," he said. At that point, I was almost afraid to look, but I went anyway, the buzzing feeling growing stronger. I stepped inside and just about lost my mind. The entire laundry room had been painted to look like a scene out of Alice in Wonderland. The walls were adorned with swirling colors and whimsical trees. The door to the garage was painted like the famous doorknob from the animated movie, with a tiny dog door painted to look like the rabbit hole Alice had fallen through. Wonderland and Atlantis, two mythical places tied to lost worlds and hidden realities. Two symbols of mystery and imagination, tucked away in the most mundane of places, the bathroom and the laundry room. Go figure. It was like I had been handed a treasure map. Moments like this made me wonder about the fundamental question: what is real? This house felt like it existed in the same liminal space, somewhere between dream and reality. I walked back out of the living room, glancing down at the book in my hands. Was I just reading about Atlantis, or was I living it? I started to wonder if these mythic places we think of, like fairy tales, Atlantis, Wonderland, Shangri-La, were more real than I had imagined. Maybe they weren't places you find on a map. Perhaps they were states of consciousness as well. And maybe I had just found the doorway to the bathroom. Moving into the house, I felt like stepping into a myth. We unpacked boxes and settled in, but I couldn't stop thinking about the synchronicities that led us here. It was too perfect to be random, too intricately woven to be mere coincidence. I began to wonder, if this was the next breadcrumb on the trail, a signal that I wasn't just living my life. I was living a story, a grand narrative written in myth and metaphor, unfolding scene by scene with every choice I made. Not long after I moved in, I got the letter I'd been waiting for. I'd been accepted into Columbia College Hollywood, a place where I could finally start studying the craft of filmmaking, where the stories that had danced in my head since childhood could be brought to life and felt like the natural extension of everything that had led me to this point. Thriller, The Titanic, Gremlins, 20 to 12, Atlantis. Even as I wrote these stories, even as I write these titles in sequence, I can't help but laugh. None of this adds up, but maybe there's a there. These weren't just moments, they were signposts leading me westward, deeper into the mystery. And California wasn't just a new place to live, it was a new chapter. As I stood there in my new room, looking out at the endless blue sky, I knew I was just getting started. I was ready to go deeper, down the rabbit hole, into the submerged ruins of Atlantis, and beyond the flickering images on the screen to find out just how far this story would go. So there you have it. That's chapter 3. That's the first 3 chapters of FreeIncarnation. I hope that was hope you like that. Up your microphone.
That was amazing, Alex. I absolutely loved it. I took some notes. I'm going to dive right into chapter 4 just for the fluidity. This is chapter 4, everyone. If you're catching the replay, FreeIncarnation, a guide to ending the war on consciousness. And just to clarify, Alex's book is not out yet, but it will be coming out. Make sure you subscribe and like to Alex's YouTube channel so you know exactly when it's available. And I'll make sure I let you know on my Buy Me a Coffee as well. All right, this is chapter 4, the director's cut. Walking into Columbia College Hollywood for the first time was literally like walking through a Stargate. It wasn't just the building itself, though it had unusual LA film school funk to it. The walls were painted with what had been left over from the movie Monkey Bone with Brandon Fraser. Walls adorned with random alumni, movie posters, and antique film equipment on display. There were stranger things afoot. I looked up at the school's logo. I froze. It was a series of concentric circles evenly layered, basically a stylistic image of glass inside a Fresnel studio light. That may be so, but my mind immediately flashed Plato's description of Atlantis, the legendary lost city designed in a series of concentric rings of water and light. I stood there for a moment, just staring at it. Design was unmistakably similar, almost like an echo from the past. Atlantis had been on my mind ever since I wrote that story in high school, and the synchronicity of finding it here on the logo of my film school felt like a flash of light from behind the veil of reality itself. I had wanted to come to California to study film, to master the art of storytelling. Standing there in that hallway, I felt something deeper pulling me in. It was as if I had been invited, not just to learn the craft of the filmmaking, but to unlock the hidden architecture of reality itself. Going down the rabbit hole, I thought, as I pushed through the doors and walked inside. On some unspoken level, I knew I wasn't just going to film school. I was going to Atlantis, not the mystical city from ancient lore, but the symbol of it represented. Place where mystery and mastery coexist, where those who sought knowledge were initiated into the deeper secrets of existence. In Plato's accounts, Atlantis was a place of great power and understanding, a civilization that had reached the heights of technological and spiritual mastery before disappearing beneath the waves. Columbia College Hollywood had its own kind of mystery, a lesser-known film school where images came to life, where illusion was crafted and projected onto scenes to become real. In my mind, the concentric circles of that logo weren't just a design by choice. This was a very intriguing clue that I was exactly where I was supposed to be. I was here to go to college, yes, but on a deeper level, I felt I had been granted access to the mystery school of Atlantis, where I would learn the secret languages of light and shadow, sound and silence, perception and reality. One of the best features of this school was that we got to focus entirely on making movies from day one. Many of the more well-known film schools require students to study theory and general education stuff before they'd let you rent a camera. I was very happy to jump right in and learn the ropes. And if storytelling was a way to project worlds onto screens, then maybe, just maybe, it could be a way to project the world of the imagination onto life itself. Ever since I was a kid, I knew I wanted to make movies. There was something magical about the way stories unfolded on the screen, larger than life, yet somehow deeply personal. As I got older, my fascination with film became intertwined with something much bigger, an insatiable desire to understand reality itself. I began to see storytelling not just as an art form, but as a gateway to understanding the universe. Does art imitate life, or does life imitate art? That question haunted me, especially as synchronicities were piling up around me, turning everyday experiences into cinematic moments that seemed both spontaneous and scripted. Getting accepted into Columbia College Hollywood felt like stepping into a long-awaited scene. I had always imagined myself in Los Angeles, learning the craft of filmmaking, exploring the language of cinema, and finally having the opportunity to bring my stories to life. But I wanted more than just to make movies. I wanted to peel back the layers of reality itself, to understand how stories were created, not just on screen, but in life. When I moved into a house in Granada Hills with my friends, it felt like we were setting up our own little creative commune. It was a step up from a dorm, a place where we could truly explore the boundaries of our minds and our craft. The house itself became a canvas, literally. We drew all over the walls in psychedelic swirls of color and symbols, inspired by late night acid trips and philosophical conversations that stretched until dawn. In the hallway where our bedrooms were, we dubbed the East Wing. We had glued a photo of Timothy Leary on the wall in there. His eyes wide and tripped out watched us as we walked about. His ideas about consciousness and the expansion of the mind influencing not just our view of reality, but the way we were created. The art, we're the big part of our experience, to say the least. I still have pictures of those walls, an explosion of color and ideas, a mosaic of timeless nature. It was hard to explain the experience of living there, of writing on those walls. It was more than just decoration. It was a ritual, a kind of communion with the unknown. We weren't just painting symbols. We were unraveling mysteries, tapping into something deeper that seemed to speak through us as much as we spoke through it. It was as if the walls were breathing, pulsating with the energy of our thoughts and the limitless possibility we dreamed up night after night. The film set and the mind, this is another part of chapter 4. As I got deeper into my studies, I began to notice something interesting about the way a film set worked. Every role had its purpose, its part to play in the grand orchestration of turning vision into reality. The more I studied, the more I started to see parallels between the structure of a film set and the architecture of the mind. The director, always envisioning the big picture, holding the entire story in their mind's eye, is like the right brain. It's emotional, symbolic, intuitive, always looking for deeper meaning, the bigger picture. It's the dreamer, the visionary, the one who says, "This is where we're going." Then there's the assistant director, or AD. While the director is lost in the magic of creation, AD is grounded in the practicalities, scheduling, logistics, safety, making sure everything runs on time. It's the left brain of the operation, logical, linear, organized. It doesn't care so much about the dream. It cares about how to make the dream happen, step by step, frame by frame. Watching this play out on set was like watching the mind externalized. The director calls the shots, but without the AD, nothing would ever get done. It mirrored my own struggle to balance imagination with reality, vision with execution. And just like in life, you can dream as big as you want, but you still need to take concrete steps to make it real. And then there's the crew. Unsung heroes, grips, graphers, camera operators, sound engineers. They're like the subconscious mind, working behind the scenes, invisible yet absolutely vital. They pull the strings, set the lights, adjust the sound, creating the environment in which the story can come to life. Just like our subconscious mind, they are tirelessly always moving, always creating the framework for the conscious mind to act upon. The more I studied film, the more I realized it was like a synchronism of reality itself, blueprint, understanding how perception creates experience. Movies are just stories made tangible, projections of thought onto a screen. What if life itself worked the same way? What if synchronicity, those mysterious moments, perfect timing, was just the director calling Action in the theater of reality. My time at Columbia College Hollywood was like living in a surreal dreamscape, one that wove together film, synchronicity, and a deeper exploration of reality itself. And when it came time to make my thesis film, I knew exactly what I wanted in my story and what to tell. I called it Hidden. On the surface, it was a satire inspired by Lost, the TV show that had captivated audiences and my own imagination with its mysterious island and endless puzzles. But just like everything else that had unfolded in my life, Hidden wasn't just a simple homage. It was a reflection of everything I had come to understand about reality. The story follows an actor who breaks the fourth wall. In other words, looks into the camera and becomes suddenly aware of the set he is on, with all the crew, stage lights, and studio fanfare, which until that moment were completely hidden from him. He walks through life as if it's part of the script, until he starts to notice the edges fraying, the seams of reality coming undone. He discovers that there's a behind the scenes to this world, his world, crew pulling strings, setting scenes, building the very fabric of existence. Much like the Truman Show, it was about waking up from the illusion, but with one crucial difference. Instead of escaping the set, my character learns to change the script. This idea wasn't just a plot device. It was a revelation I had come to in my time at film school. If life is like a movie, if synchronicity is a sign that we are both director and actor, then we have the power to rewrite the scenes of our lives. We can choose to step out of old stories, and perhaps with the right perception, a magical perception, we can literally create a new one. Making Hidden was my intention. It was my first real attempt at directing my own life, pulling back the curtain and deciding to take control of the narrative. As I wrapped up my final semester, I realized I wasn't just leaving film school. I was emerging from Atlantis, stepping out of Wonderland, and preparing to take everything.
Is that where it ends? Your document ends right there?
Yes, my document ended there. I'm just not sure if that was my teleprompter cutting me off there.
Yeah, there's just like a couple of sentences after that. If I can read those if you want.
Oh, maybe there's a space. Maybe there's a space. Those couple sentences got cut off, but I have the document here. Okay, nice. Hold on. Stepping out of Wonderland. Okay, as I wrapped up my final semester, I realized I wasn't just leaving film school. I was emerging from Atlantis, stepping out of Wonderland and preparing to take everything I had learned about storytelling, synchronicity, and perception into the real world. And if Hidden had taught me anything, it was that I was just getting started. That one little bit wouldn't fit in my teleprompter. Wow, what an amazing book. Alex Lipton, FreeIncarnation, A Guide to Ending the War on Consciousness, chapters 1, 2, 3, and 4, read right here for the first time ever on Story Species, Story Medicine, Extra Strength. And Alex, I can't thank you enough for sharing your medicine with us. I don't know how much time you have left, but it'd be nice to take any questions from the audience. And I'm full of questions, but definitely we're going to have Alex back here. With me, it's easy to slip into timelessness. And it seems like that way too with Alex. just looking at the comments here, lots of thank yous. Missing Time 420, really enjoying this, and finding it easy to connect with Alex from a story maker perspective, because Jason, Missing Time 420, also has a background in the movie business. And again, Dragon Dreamers here, really enjoying this. Lots of appreciation. Sneak time preview, popcorn yellowed strip. Just reading here, it's showing a smile. This has been one of the most relatable things I've ever heard in a very long time. And you know what? Jason participates a lot in the chat, but definitely participating a lot today. So that's really great. And Alex showing appreciation in the chat. And insight from Stephen King. Have you read this book, Stephen King's Memoir, Alex?
I have, and I've watched a lot of videos with Stephen King and diving into his whole writing process and I love Stephen King and his whole. That was why I decided to start writing my book at the hotel that he wrote The Shining. Yeah, no, super interesting, and I love his descriptive language, and also just doing a little bit every day, and just going with it, just like kind of seeing where things unfold. Super interesting.
And I just need some notes here, because I tend to brain fart it out. But the lobs, like the lobsters, that is hilarious. So thank you for sharing that.
True story.
And just seeing Alex as a real person, going to school, having friends, doing things like drawing on the walls, an appreciation for books. In your book, your writer's voice really comes through. It sounds very authentic, and there's a deep sense of humility crossed with empowerment, because you say it multiple times, like this book is a guide, this book is to give you some direction, a stepping stone, and you're very open to none of this being set in stone, and then relating to yourself personally, and the empowerment to take charge of your life, and also the empowerment to listeners, readers, and viewers to go do their own research. Like if you feel inspired by Alex, great, but you don't have to listen to Alex. This is a guide. Go do your own thinking, then come back and connect with Alex, then diagram it up with Alex. He's a circle, you're a circle, finding that middle ground together, remembering to remember, and reminding what we already know, and we don't even know what we know, so we have to go and discover and relearn, and just Michael Jackson's Thriller. Like, I remember when I was a kid too, being freaked out and not really being sure, like, and being fascinated by the end when they show how it's actually made. This business of what is real. I love how you refer to synchronicity as a language. All of the maybes and wondering. I wonder this, maybe that, perhaps this. Like, you can see how one thought unfolds. It's just like a flower opening and blooming. What else did I write? I like how one idea leads to another idea. Like, you didn't just, yeah, that sounds interesting. You took it upon yourself to learn about astrology and used it as a divinational tool. And the business about the Titanic and how this, 20 to 12 and the 1140, and then in Gremlins and these rules. And I actually made a note about David Wilcock. He's written a number of books. I read one of his books, and I don't even remember what it was called, because no offense to David Wilcock, but it had the word synchronicity in it. But the trouble is, he kept referring to his other books in this book, and then I literally was like, "What book am I even reading?"
Yeah.
Was reading.
David Wilcock. I used to follow him quite a bit especially back in those days.
Oh, cool. When I first started watching Gaia, David Wilcock, full disclosure, that's where I was starting to find answers. But the book that I did read talked about, like, kind of like you, he paralleled his personal life to rock concerts and stuff like that going on, and music coming out that had synchronicity. So I thought that was cool. And then I'm almost done here. One question leading to another. And then it reminded me of the hero's journey and what it means to go on a quest, to be in a state of questing. And now we're talking about the ing again and being in the now, and we're always in a state of ing. So some of us feel like we can be like traitors or going against authority. It can be very stressful to question, but we're encouraged to have this alchemy, to explore, to go on a quest for not more answers necessarily, but to actually generate more questions, and to have those questions alchemized. Trust in the trusting in the flow, and to trust radically, even if you don't understand something. Grandma Gladys, I like how even the influence of grandma's coming back now. And you know, I don't know grandma, I don't know Alex's family, but I get the vibe that grandma was into Atlantis and was, you know, likely supporting your learning and saw that you had an interest. And then just the way everything came together with the bathroom and the laundry room being, you know,
So
like,
trippy. Like
and just,
anytime I think about that, or just anytime I'm at my parents' house, it's like it's still no matter what. Like if to go do my laundry, I'm literally on the threshold of Wonderland every time. That was such a weird. I was just couldn't make that up if I wanted to. It was just so weird.
and are your parents still living at that place right
Yeah,
now? Like,
yeah, yeah.
that is
Yeah,
so
it's
cool.
funny. Like once we found that house, I was like, "This is the house." We went to a bunch of other houses after that, and I think some that my parents liked. I would be like, I don't know, this house is haunted. I don't like this house. Every single house, I definitely think I made a major influence, and we need to get this one. We can't not get the Atlantis bathroom house.
That is hilarious. And who knows, maybe next time we see your van, there'll be some new artwork in there. I don't
Yeah,
see any more questions from the chat. I really want to take a moment to thank Alex Lipton for sharing his story medicine with us today. His book, I'm trying to bring it on the stage. There we go. FreeIncarnation, and it's intentionally one word, a guide to ending the war on consciousness. And Alex, do you have any final thoughts? We've got your link in the description, Video Shaman. Make sure you give Alex some loving, give him a like and a subscribe. And
yeah.
any final thoughts, Alex?
Yeah, well, I just want to say thank you. This has been a pleasure and a really great experience, and so cool to see people in the chat and get the love there, and my love to all of you guys as well. And yeah, I think all in all, though, free incarnation is a really exciting concept. That you're right. There's definitely a lot more that the final draft, taking a lot of things out to make room for other things. There's more books that come in here, and originally I set out to tell a lot of the stuff that I learned over the years. But then as I started writing, and it became more of an autobiography, especially in like a memoir in the beginning. And then as I started to realize that, it's like, okay, I think that's the most important thing, is recognizing the homology between how our brains and our nervous system create our perception of reality, and how a film set creates a movie. And the experience of going in and watching a movie is almost, I think we can learn a lot about how reality works just by experiencing a movie. And then even video games too. Like video games can just the interactive nature of things. So it's really about liberation. It's very Promethean in that way. Stealing fire from the gods to deliver it to humanity, but reframing it in a way where we actually recognize that Prometheus was not the bad guy we thought he was. There's a lot of flipping of the script, and again, it's a guide. There's so much in there that you can go and do the research like I did. But my main thing that I want to share is a story that comes from the heart, that's real, that can help people feel less alone and less afraid about what's going on in the world, because there's so much we can't control. And this is a story about trying to share how I learned that. And it's like, if I can go back in time and give myself this book back in 20 years ago now, how much, like the almanac from Back to the Future, if I could do that, I would have saved myself a lot of trouble along the way. You know, so that's it. I'm basically trying to do a little time travel experience and give some people things that I wish I had when I was younger.
That is amazing, and that's probably a very good way to end our show today on Story Species, Story Medicine. Here today with us, Alex Lipton. Thank you so much, Alex. Story Species, I have a strong belief that we are a story species, and stories are our medicine. And I thank you so much for sharing your medicine with us today, for being a medicine bearer. It's hard to believe, but it wasn't that long ago folks out there couldn't speak freely about this kind of stuff. And it's still a little bit taboo for a lot of us. And so I'm very grateful to have you with us today. Thank you so much, Alex. I've got an outro video here. And also, if folks are following me on Buy Me a Coffee, make sure that you keep following me, because Alex is going to be presenting at the first ever conference, which is in honor of Story Species, Story Medicine. It's all part of Project 30. But that in itself is a separate presentation. So thank you so much again, Alex. Thank you so much, Dragon Dreamers, for following us today on Story Species, Story Medicine, Extra Strength 2026. And we will see you all next time. Take care.